Hello, 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 oh, hello, 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 hello. Please welcome everybody. Welcome everyone. Everybody, yeah. Rock your body, yeah. Rock your body, right. Right. So please hit that like button. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so, and please hit that notification bell and press all notifications. Thank you very much. Then we've got join the join the Alternate Corner community. Sarah P is offering you an opportunity to join as a blue wench or a tackle, both the same, just slight price difference. That's all. For those that maybe can't afford the first membership. So please, if you consider being a member, you get access to Discord and well, you get videos like this afternoon where or this morning, like I make a mess of things. You have to become a member to find out what that mess was. Check out the official Ultra Corner merch. Yeah, I know a lot of people bought it at the start, and no one's really bought any for a while now, but that's fine. If you fancy buying some merch, get on it like a carb on it. Get on it like a carb on it. If you'd like to support the channel, consider a donation. Yes, please. Don't send super chats. Send PayPal's. And then we pay 10% rather than paying wherever they charge me 40, 50%, whatever it is. Hey, Sar, keep anything crossed for the stream long. Y'all, Nunya's in the house. Hello, Emma Nunya. Hello, Nunya Business. But I cheated and washed ahead. As we all now going to hear Kentucky. Oh my god. And Ohio mention you, disgrace, Jonathan. Well, Jonathan's watching Viva. Viva Las Vegas. Viva, Viva Las Vegas. Viva Frey, or whatever his name is. So I found the continuation of Nesta, but couldn't. You lost me now. The insignificant tidbit, but sadly I forgot. Hi, Katie. Hello. Welcome back, Katie. Hopefully this stream is going to be better. Less problems with it than the others today. But welcome, Katie. Geez, you see, only a popular stream this is. Hey, Katie. Hello, Emma. Hello, Katie. Did you solve the male to male problems? No, no. We don't like male to males. We didn't like it. Female to female. We could have sorted it, but tomorrow. We've got a new wire coming tomorrow now. But at least something like that, than rather than me not being able to do it. It just didn't make sense. So, hi Katie, hi Sarah, hi Yes. Don't know his experience in 3 ways. I don't know. And is Hans here? Hans needs to teach me the ways of 3 ways. She needs to teach me Hans. Angie, where are you? Oh no, kids are ill. Kids are ill. Hang on, can I see if I can see the settings now then? If I can change my audio then. No, I can't. Nope. So you're hearing me off my oh, bro. This is on. Blue lights on, but nobody's home. It won't work. It's plugged in, but it won't work. How disappointing. Dan Nabbit. Yes. Yes. Happy trial days. Yes, Katie. So literally. So just an update. So after we finish today, we'll find out when they're going to do closings, whether they're going to do closings today or whether they're going to do closings next week, or because of Veterans Day tomorrow, or they're doing it tomorrow. So we'll find out. If there's time, we'll do day 3 at the end, because we know they're going into the hospital one, that we know they're going into closing arguments. So we'll watch that. But all depends. This is our priority trial. This trial is our priority trial. So it depends what they do here. I really don't like the defense attorney. No, neither do I, Nunya. Neither do I. I didn't mind the female one to start off with, but now I don't like her either. I don't either, Nunya. No, Donald Mike is going to sound 3 times as good as his old one. Good deal. It's a good enough mic to record music with, so you know it's good. I would not record music on his old mic. Fucking Jonathan. Jonathan's absolutely ruining me. Absolutely ruining my gear. All the gear. You see, the saying is all the gear, but no idea. That's me. So I'm watching this video on my huge TV. I'm old and blind. Hush your mouth. I'm chatting with my mobile. Bloody hell, man. Do not mess. Do not mess. Stop touching. Well, Katie, I was naked earlier on. Absolutely bollocks naked because I spilled coffee all over myself. Literally all the way through to my boxers. My balls were bloody wet. So, and they've not been wet for a long time, let me tell you. His new one is a. John's still going. Cardioid condenser. Cardioid. Me, this RP, I probably knit instead. Well, hospital, way too triggered. It's all right. To be fair, today we've not seen anything. Yesterday we saw a bit of gore. Today didn't see anything, and they're in closings now. So it's defendant went on, and now it's in closing. So it was a nice trial actually. 3 day trial. I want to know if Jessy would testify. I bet she doesn't. I don't think she does. I don't think she does. From my understanding, because last night they said that this is the last witness, and then there's going to be one rebuttal witness apparently. Is what I read up. Now I've not seen it, so don't officially know, but apparently, from what we read, Kathy Runson was saying that this witness will be a long witness, and then one rebuttal witness, and that's it. So that doesn't mean that she won't. She could change her mind. It's up to her. But as of this second, I don't believe she is. Cardioid electric. Fucking. It can take shitty noises or even loud as fuck bass. You keep saying that, Jonathan, and we are waiting. I mean, exactly, Jonathan. The fucking mics, yeah. The mics, yeah. I got everything. I will say this, right? I ordered everything Jonathan told me to order. So technically, it's not my fault. Technically, not my fault. I got everything. I went on stream and I said, "Is this everything?" And Jonathan's laughing, going, "Yeah, that's everything." Now, don't blame Jonathan because Jonathan is helping me out. So I will not blame him. But if you want to blame anyone, blame Jonathan. Blame Jonathan. Um, so we're waiting. I had to pay $10, I believe it was, for one more cord, and we should be good to go. Which makes sense because I was like, it doesn't fit. None of this bloody fits. Mr. Moore, he genuinely did. I thought I was going to show it on screen because I forgot. I thought my camera was on. I spilled coffee everywhere. It was dripping through me. It wasn't nice. He gave us a close-up crotch shot yesterday. I did, just for Sarah P, but she never said anything. Sarah P likes she likes the woo, but she doesn't say she likes it. She acts like, oh no, I don't like. And again, involve recovery. A lot of this last one, Shirley. This was a nice soothing. Yeah, What is good smooth signals? Yes. Father Power's also important when I genuinely, John, I love Jonathan, right? But he's speaking. I have no fucking idea what he's talking about. No idea what he's talking about. Phantom something power. No idea. This guy, I am trusting him 100%. Tomorrow, when we set up, he could laugh at me, go, "Ha, you idiot! I was only joking. Don't have to buy all that stuff." I have no idea. I'm absolutely sure. That's how much trust I have in Jonathan. Literally, I have no idea what he's on about. I've got a top of the range bloody mic here. I've got a top of the range everything. I'm trusting Jonathan over the experts. That's how much love I have for Jonathan and trust I have in him. And you want advice to buy his old one? Exactly, Emma. Well, yeah, but if you are using earbud mic or laptop mic, whether on what you are. So I'm doing now. This is the camera mic. So I'm using this. Oh, you can't see it. Fuck, idiot. You can't see it because I'm holding it. Oops, no. So that's my mic is in that camera. That's what I'm using at the minute. Yeah, that's sad to say, but you haven't heard the judge say anything about her, Tessa. I think they did it last. They might have done it last night. I don't know. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. I use the same phantom powers my dad has for my mic. I have my own mic sold with a better microphone condenser to make it nicer. Sherry, how do you deal with him? How do you deal with him? We love him. We love him. And thank you, Sherry, for being here as well. Thank you for keeping him under control, Sherry. Somebody needs to. The other corner, you can have the same newer 40. You see, 48 valve box I use for my microphone now. I'm very anal about the audio. Well, obviously you're anal because you had male to male, and only will get a good. And I thought Rode was a good band, Rode A, whatever they're called. Made a lower the range microphone price like a decent studio mic. Then what did you think of the medical examiner brought by defense? I don't remember. I don't remember. No, no, I do remember. She's good. She's good. She's good. I thought she's good. I thought she was good. I thought she was good. I thought she was honest. I thought she was good for both sides. And yeah, I think she was good. That's why I'm still a little bit on the fence about guilty for murder, even though I was pretty much on my own. I think stuff, but goes over my head in that area. Yeah, I mean most areas, sorry, most areas. But we love him, so I listen to him. And I will give him a shout out, John. You guys don't see it here, but my Discord, whoop, he helps me. I'm like, John, what do you think? Bang, it's answered. He still hasn't found me a stand for this. So tomorrow I'm gonna be like this. Hey, hey, baby. Ooh, I, I wanna know if you be my girl. One, two, three, four. Hey, hey, baby. Ooh, I wanna know if you be my girl. One, two, three, four, five, six, seven, eight. Hey, no, that's enough. I'll be holding it all the time. Right, we need to start this trial, aren't we? We need to start it. Yeah, it's glazed over. Look, I get when he hubby, lol. She only ever listens to amazing sound quality, and I'm an amazing cook. So, oh, Jonathan, docking when you go male to male. I thought the state stunned her. No, I don't think so. I thought she was very good. I actually thought she was. I thought she was good for both sides. They done that with a sense of, did you know this? Did you know that? Well, of course, she didn't. But it didn't change her mind in the end. I thought she was a good, credible witness. And I think she was credible for both sides, not just the defense. I thought she was credible for the state as well. All they call it designed for musicians, performers, really great audio. You could see. You see? M7. What's the M7? Both of warm frequency. Very rejected. I agree, Katie. The state made her look bad in my. Nah, Nunia, I know I love you. You know I love you. Love you, Nunia. I have to disagree with you there. I don't think that state made her look bad at all. I thought she did very well. But we've all got different opinions, so it's good. No, thanks. Right, John, I can't. It's 134 decibels of SPL handling. I can't. I have zero idea. Good job, Jonathan. I'm singing along and love that song. I know it's a good song, isn't it? He doesn't even know what the M7 is. My God. No, M7? I've no idea. So we've got M4 motorway. M4 motorway, that's what I know. M7, not a idea. Love the singing. Thank you, Sherry. Jonathan gets frustrated at me when your songs. Thursday, happy days. Oh, happy days. I better not sing it. Thank you, Sherry. That's my day. Thank you. Right. Let's get this trial underway, shall we? Let's get it underway. Let's get it on. Let's get it on. Live streaming. In other words, it's amazing for the money and sounds as bears. Okay, I trust you. I told you I trust you. That's good. Yeah, I trust you. I know, right? I know very few songs he hums or sings, but when I do, I sing along to the fact. McDonald's, Kentucky Fried Chicken and Pizza Hut. McDonald's, Kentucky Fried Chicken and a Pizza Hut. That's an advert in the UK. Yeah. Keep singing, girl. Right, let's get it on here. Let's get that. I'm not playing about with this one now. They're on lunch break currently. This is about 2 hours and 40 minutes, I think. They're still on lunch break. Thank you, I sure will. No, thank you, Sherry. Thank you for looking after Jonathan for us as well. Right, I'm going to put up 1.25. Her face, where the state is filled her, It's going to be quite a big improvement. You're going to be tickled. I'm going to be tickling the pink. Jonathan, will be tickling the pink. Let's go. Here we go.
It's probably better from a standpoint of walking back and forth as well. It's that extra chair was only there because of the
there she is, Sherry.
I know she
right,
does
oh,
well.
she's gorgeous.
All right, thank you, everyone. Please be seated. Attorney Kugler, you may call your next witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning. We call Henry Spiller.
Good morning, Mr. Spiller. If you would please make your way to the witness stand. It is all the way up to the front on my right, up one riser. When you get there, please remain standing, raise your right hand, and my clerk, Teresa, on my left will swear you in.
Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
Thank you, sir. Please have a seat.
I got a cold on the airline, and that's why I'm wearing these.
That's okay. I'm sure Attorney Kugler will make a record of it, but thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. You can hear me okay, though?
Yes, I think it gives me the court what's being said by the microphones and things.
Very good. If you need, there's volume if you need to adjust it.
Thank you.
I will ask you initially to state your first and last names for the record and spell each.
Henry, Henry, Spiller, Spiller.
Thank you. Go ahead, Attorney Kugler, your witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, Mr. Spiller.
Good morning.
So thank you for being here. Did you have to fly to get here?
Yes,
You live in, Indiana? Or
yes, I caught a cold, which is why I'm wearing the headset because my ears clogged up in the after the flight.
between the flight and the cold? Okay. If you can't hear me, just let me know. Okay, so good morning. Thank you for being here. I'd like the jury to get to know you. And in that respect, Madam Clerk, could you share my screen? I'd like to show you what, and you have a TV right there. I'm going to show you, let me know when it comes up, Exhibit 544. It's there.
Yes,
And would you take a look? Does this appear to be your curriculum vitae?
it does. Yes.
And do you want me to scroll down? It's 44 pages.
Basically, it tells me my professional experience, various positions I've held, my education, and a lot of the research I do. Research was a big part of what I did, so I have about 250 publications. It goes on for pages and pages.
Right. No, I'll go into some detail about it. What I'm asking you is if this is a true and correct copy of your curriculum vitae.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Move for admission, Your Honor, of Exhibit 544.
Exhibit 544 is received and permission to publish is granted.
Thank you. And it'll be just a minute. We wait for the screens to come on at the jury box. There's a delay usually. It's up. It's passed today. All right. So I would like the jury to get to know you. And would you tell us a little bit first about your education?
I've, pardon me, a couple degrees. My first degree is in English and Spanish literature from Rutgers. My next degree is a degree in nursing, and the third degree is a master's in toxicology.
Okay. And you are board certified.
Yes, I'm board certified by the American Board of Applied Toxicology. That is the certification board of the American Academy of Clinical Toxicology.
So are you a toxicologist?
Yes, it's part of, you need to be board certified to run one of the 55 poison centers in the United States. I ran 2 of them.
Okay, you ran 2 of the poison centers in the
Yes,
US.
I moved, not at once.
Let's hear a little bit about your employment then. Can you tell the jury about your employment?
Years ago, I started as a nurse in the trauma center. And to be honest, after about 2 or 3 years, I got out of there because it's, I don't know if you've ever been there, it's rather bloody and unpleasant. People punch you. So I went into toxicology. And from toxicology, I was at Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. I started to publish research. Kentucky, at that point, I think it was 1993 or 94, recruited me to become their director. So I moved from Philadelphia to Kentucky. I was there for about 20 years. And in the last 8 or 9 years of my career, Ohio recruited me to be the director of their poison center at Nationwide Children's Hospital in Columbus, and also an assistant professor at the School of Medicine at OSU, Ohio State University.
So assistant professor, meaning you teach?
Yes. Various, we would have 2 primary groups, pharmacy and medicine. So we would have
This is from today. Yeah, this is from today. So this is the last witness of the defense, unless she testifies.
medical students in their final year of School of Medicine, and then we would have them as, after they graduated and were doctors, they would have also come through a second rotation in toxicology. We would also have fellows. So if you have finished your residency and you want expertise, you go to a fellowship. And we would bring the fellows in also for a month. Those were the 3 groups in medicine: the medical students, the medical residents, and the medical fellows. And in pharmacy, we would have the pharmacy students. They're 6-year PharmD programs. And then after that, if they want to work in a hospital, they have to go through a 2-year clerkship now. And so they would come back for another month of toxicology in the poison center. And so they would get hands-on experience with the toxicology cases. And there would be didactic sessions. We would involve them in research at times. We would try and make their experience better.
And so you're teaching medical students and doctors about
Yes.
toxicology?
Yes, every day.
Every day. Now, as a director of a poison center,
We had one other thing. We had a medical toxicology fellowship program at the poison center. So we had specifically 2 ER doctors, 1 Air Force colonel who needed to know about toxicology. But we had a number of them after they had finished their residency. They wanted a fellowship in toxicology, and that is 2 years. The other, like if they were a pediatric fellow, they would come for 1 month, get a toxicology rotation, but the medical toxicology fellows would be there for 2 years.
And you would teach these
Yes,
students?
that's why they would come there.
When you were the director for 20 years at the Kentucky Poison Center, well, let me ask you, what is the Kentucky Poison Center?
There are 55 poison control centers in the nation. Some states have a single one. Wisconsin has a single one. Kentucky has a single one. Some larger states like California have 4 to cover their larger population. Texas has 6. Some smaller states like Rhode Island use Massachusetts, but there are 55 that cover the entire U.S. population. And it is available it's free. And you get expertise. The people who answer the phone have to be a licensed nurse, a licensed pharmacist, or a licensed physician. There are no volunteers. They have to have one of those 3 licenses to answer the phone. About 70% of the calls come from home. My child got under the sink and found this cleaning product, or got granddad's medication or something. And about 25 to 30% are the emergency rooms throughout the state, who rely on the poison center as their standard of care for toxicology. So the ER doc will call in, or the ER nurse will say, I've got a 28-year-old male who got into these 4 things. These are the blood, this is the, their vital signs.
Before this was just the judge saying about giving restrictions about what they could say to this guy. So I skipped that. I didn't put that in. No. No worries, Katie. I'll see you in a bit.
Our initial labs, we would go through what we would expect, what they needed to treat them for, and we would become a toxicology consultant on those. They would stay in that hospital.
So in that regard, how is it that is that what you made a study of out of your career, is what the side effects are from drugs and expected side effects in people?
Yes. Toxicology has an.
Do you know this? Sorry, guys. Emma, do you know this? Fruit and nut.
It's unethical to take humans and poison them. So I can't take 50 children. No mother is going to give me 50 children, and I'm going to increase the dose until the child is ill. So in many cases, we take because we have such volume. Like, for example, in Kentucky and Ohio, the center had between 38 and 40,000 cases a year. We would take this volume and we would find these cases and observe. If we could, we would get blood on them. We'd do all sorts of things so that we could determine what we were concerned about. Which ones were the serious ones, which ones weren't, what do we do about those? In clinical trials for new drugs, there's actually sections where people volunteer for like $50 or $100 a day, and they stay there and they give them small amounts of the drug, and they give them, so they see what happens and that sort of thing. And it's volunteer, and they present these studies to the FDA to get approved. But we're working at doses that by nature toxicology hurts you. And so we can't do that. We have to wait till someone does it in our region. And then we will publish single case reports, large studies, multi-year studies. And it's helpful because the other centers can read these papers. So then they don't have to redo the same study. They don't have to reinvent the wheel in California if I've already done it in Ohio or Kentucky.
So I'm understanding that you have these patients that are in hospitals, is that right?
Yes.
And the hospital gets a hold of you
Yes.
And either it's a doctor or a nurse or physician's assistant, whoever, gets a hold of you and explains what kind of poisoning sort of case they have.
What they have so far.
And
Because there's iterations. Like when they roll in the door, they don't have to have the entire story. Things happen. So we follow them until they're discharged.
Okay. So you follow the case till discharge from the hospital.
Yes.
Some of those people die.
Yes.
Do you follow them to death?
Yes. They're a different group. Of that roughly 38 to 40,000 cases, about 40 of them die. So we've had them as alive patients, and heroically, there are certain things that are they're deadly. So we follow them through their therapy, and then they die. And anyone we lose, we have to write what's known as an abstract on that patient. So we have to get all the information. We go and get the hospital record. We go and get the coroner's record. What we know about it, and we write up a 1-page abstract on what happened. Why do we think this person died from this?
So cases that you might be talking about today in court would be cases that you have knowledge about because you've looked at these sorts of records.
Yes.
Okay. Now you said that you have in Kentucky, that was 40,000 cases a year that come through the poison center. What about in Ohio? Is it about the
It's
same?
about the same size.
Okay. So that's a lot of cases.
Yes, it's about 100 to 120 a day. It's a little busier in the summer. It's a little quieter in December and January, kind of. But yeah, it's about, so in December, we might get 95, 100 a day. In May, June, July, August, we'll get 120 a day.
So that's a lot of cases that your poison center is dealing with on a weekly basis.
Hourly basis.
Hourly basis.
Yes,
It's not just one here and there. It sounds constant.
it is pretty constant.
When you are looking at these cases that come through the hospital and ultimately that you're following, are some of these suicide cases?
Yes, oh yes. Of those roughly 10,000 or so that are seen in the hospital, I'd say about 6,000-ish are suicide attempts.
So that's more than 6,000. That's more than one a day.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
It's closer to 10 a day.
10 a day are suicides. They come through the poison center.
Correct. It's all over the state. I mean, they don't come to the center. If they're at, Kentucky's a fairly big state. Wisconsin's a big state. You know, I don't know the geography of Wisconsin, but they could be 200 miles from where I think the poison center's in Madison, but they might be in a hospital 200 miles. They still get the same level of standard of care. It's telemedicine. We talk to the ER doc. We get access to the electronic medical record. So we can just log in and see the labs, see what they've done so far, see how they're doing. We get a hold of the doctor or the nurse. You know, if there's a course change we recommend or something.
When you do that, do you get things such as blood levels or urine levels on drugs?
Not all of them. Some they're pretty rare, and the hospital does it. They can get them for you, but it's about a 3-day send out. You have to send it to a laboratory, and by the time we get it back, it's 3 or 4 days later. We've already treated the patient. So, but there are others, like for instance, dilantin phenytoin is an anticonvulsant. We can get that. Acetaminophen, aspirin, alcohol. We can get those in like 5 minutes. So we get levels on some of them. We don't on others because they're not done in the hospital.
And as far as urine versus blood, do drugs remain longer in one or another?
Yes, they remain longer in urine, and you can't convert urine levels to blood levels.
Okay, so when
Urine levels are used for, they're best for if you agree to not take a certain drug. Say, I don't know, you're a railroad engineer, or you're on probation, or it's a divorce case, or I don't know, there's some reason, court order, or your job order, or something. You say, I will not take this.
Okay.
Urine, we can find it for, depends on the drug, 5 to 7 days, 7 to 30 days. So it's used in those cases because you've said, I'm not going to use this. And then we could say, well, you did. But you can't be back extrapolated to say this urine level means this blood level. You just can't do that.
Okay, you can't convert one to the other.
No.
All right, I've just pulled up page 5 of your CV. Looks like you're a member of various boards, is that right?
Yes.
And also that you've won awards.
Yes.
You won awards and you've been elected as a fellow by the American Academy of Clinical Toxicology, it looks like.
Yes.
And you presented at many meetings, haven't you?
Yes. I presented in Europe. I used to work with World Health Organization and Pan American Health Organization, presented in South America, North America, obviously, and Asia.
And you've got 20-some pages of presentations. I'm not going to go through them all. Suffice it to say, there's a lot of them.
Yes.
You're invited to present all over the place.
Yes.
Now, you've also written, have you not?
Yes, ma'am.
You've been published.
Yes.
You've written book chapters, it seems, I'm seeing here on your
Yes.
CV. For example, the Encyclopedia of Toxicology, you wrote a chapter in that.
Yes.
And several times you've written chapters in that particular publication.
Yes. We also have medical toxicology.
Do other people in your field of toxicology rely upon these encyclopedias?
I think these are used mainly by non-toxicologists, like the ER doc will pop it open or something like that.
Okay, the hospital.
Yes.
I see. And then you've published articles.
Yes.
And you've published articles on a lot of different subjects, right?
Been a long career.
But all having to do with basically having
Oh,
to do
yes,
with
they're all toxicology.
all toxicology. And so you've written about the effects of drugs on people.
not just drugs, snake bites, carbon monoxide, selenium, industrial accidents. Toxicology is anything that can get into a human. So yes, I'd say 80% are about drugs. I think there's 230 or 240 of them. But there's others, obviously on carbon monoxide. Selenium was a favorite of mine for a while. Others, snake bites. We got a new anti-venom. We wanted to see if it was better than the old anti-venom, things like that.
Okay. If I have, we can take this exhibit down. So I think that the jury gets a good sense now of your qualifications. Did the defense ask you to work on the case of State of Wisconsin versus Jessy Kurczewski?
Yes,
And you agreed to do so?
yes,
And you're being paid for your work?
yes,
So presently, are you living in Indiana? Do I understand that right?
yeah. Louisville, Kentucky is a river city. I live on the other side of the bridge. So I'm as close to Louisville as you could be living in Indiana. I'm at the very southern edge.
Okay. Now, in working on this case, were you provided with information,
Yes,
documents?
yes.
And can you give a brief overview to the jury of what you reviewed in this particular case?
Don't stop it. Mackie Techie. Hello, my darling. Hello, Mackie Techie. We love Mackie Techie.
There was the coroner's report, medical records. There's a number of things. I wrote them in my opinion.
Well, there should be water up there for you. There's water there for you. You bet. Could I show the witness and exhibit, Madam Clerk? Let me show you what's been marked, if you can see it, 545A.
Yes,
Does this appear to be a report you wrote
yes,
from July of 2022, it appears?
yes,
And it's 3 pages in length.
yes,
This is your report.
yes.
Your Honor, I'd move for admission of 545A.
Any objection?
No.
Exhibit 545A is received.
Permission to publish is granted.
Thank you. Yes. Wait for it to pop up.
He is very ill today.
Okay.
He has a lot of coughing.
Now, does this help you discuss, for example, the records that you reviewed in this case?
Yes, I listed them.
And from what I've heard, he does it a lot because he's super ill, apparently.
And you reviewed the autopsy, is that right?
Yes,
And you saw the NMS lab reports in this case
yes,
and supplemental reports
Yes.
from the medical examiner,
yes,
medication inventory from the medical examiner, is that right?
yes,
Inventory of medications that were found at the scene, is that true?
yes,
And you've reviewed some statements and an interview by Ms. Kurczewski too, true?
yes,
And then since then, you've also seen maybe a couple of things that were introduced during the state's case that you've reviewed, for example, maybe a chart that was prepared by and introduced through the state's case.
yes.
Okay. We don't need to show the report at this point any longer. We can just talk about it. Do you have a copy of your report there if you need it?
No.
Okay, do you need a copy of your report or you? Let me know if
If
you
you
do.
would ask me about specifics, it would help.
Okay.
I have 545A, my copy. I'll just give it to him and she can print off if there's any objection from the state. All right, there you go. I'm handing it to him. You're welcome. Thank you, madam.
So I would like to talk to you about the drugs that are at issue here.
Yes,
Are you familiar, and can you tell the jury about the drugs that were found in the system of Lynn Hernan?
yes. One by one or just list them?
Well, let's talk about them one by one and
Okay.
maybe list them first and then we can talk about them.
Baclofen, tetrahydrozoline, cyclobenzaprine, nifedipine, and ropinirole.
Those were the significant drugs.
Yes,
Let's talk about, did it concern you when you saw the drug? Well, there was tetrahydrozoline in Ms. Hernan too, right?
yes,
And did you have some concerns when you saw the drugs that were in Ms. Hernan?
Well, the two that were most dangerous were baclofen and nifedipine, and actually 3, cyclobenzaprine.
Okay.
They're the 3 that, honestly, if it rolled in as a case in the ER, you mentally start putting them in an order of what am I worried about, and what am I looking for?
For which 3 drugs?
Baclofen, nifedipine, and cyclobenzaprine.
So if you have a patient that you're consulting on in the ER and you see those 3 drugs, you become concerned?
Yes, very concerned.
Tell us about that.
Baclofen is a skeletal muscle relaxant, but it's rather unique. It is the only one that binds directly to something called the GABA receptor. GABA means gamma aminobutyric acid. The brain has lots of neurotransmitters, and they all do something. There's norepinephrine, dopamine, serotonin. I can go through a bunch of these. GABA is the only inhibitory transmitter. All these others want to fire, and they want their signal to go through. GABA inhibits the traffic. You should think of the GABA receptor as a stoplight or a traffic cop in the brain. That's its main role. It basically says, red light, you don't go, green light, you go. Then it says, okay, green light, you go, red light, you stop. It inhibits these others from constantly firing. And that is how your brain manages like a billion neurons wanting to fire. It's a sophisticated system, but baclofen directly potentiates this GABA receptor. It's one of the few substances that directly binds to that receptor. And so it shuts down activity. That's his role. And it can shut down. The more you bring on, the more you get shut down. So if the level goes up, you've got red light, not red light, green light. And you start the brain will go from, groggy to comatose. GABA is one of the few drugs, not GABA, baclofen is one of the few drugs that will give you a flatline EEG.
What does that mean?
A flatline, if we think you're brain dead, we do a number of things, but one of them is we do an EEG, see if there's brain activity, delta waves. And you may have heard of this from movies or something, but that's what we're looking for. And then we do a caloric test in the eyes and the ears, see if they move, a number of things. And a neurologist will do this and say they're brain dead. GABA will essentially shut down your brain. As long as you're on a ventilator, so we're breathing for you, GABA will just shut your brain down flat. So it's a fairly dangerous drug. There are a number of these. I had one case where we went through this brain death protocol, and they wanted to take her off the vent. We said, yeah, we'll have to wait till that GABA level the baclofen level falls. And when the baclofen level fell, she woke up and she walked out of the hospital. It is used as a skeletal muscle relaxant. Its main use is with people with cerebral palsy and spasticity, because we can shut down that spasticity. It's usually not given out, but it can be given out to people who just have, muscle spasms and things. I believe she had restless leg syndrome. But that's GABA. GABA is an inhibitory neurotransmitter.
Baclofen?
Baclofen, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Baclofen is the one that literally jumped out at me. That's a real serious one.
Well, speaking of that, have you heard of the term black box warnings?
Yes,
You do know what that is?
very much so.
Okay. I'm going to show, I'd like to publish Exhibit 579, which has already been admitted into evidence. Is this, let me know when you can see that in front of you, Mr. Spiller.
Yes.
And this has already been introduced in evidence earlier. Is this an example of a black box warning for baclofen?
Yes. Black box warnings, the FDA approves a drug and it gets something called a package insert. And that is you have to go to the FDA and say, this is what we're going to put with that drug when you get it. And it's, you fold it out, it's like 5 pages and things, but it's everything you have to tell the patient. But that's often before, apologize. It's been out in the market. It's been approved. They've gone through the studies. But then when it gets out in the market, especially after about 10 years, we start to see some other things that we did not anticipate. It might be 5 years. It might be 15 years later. However, the FDA is responsible for safety and efficacy. It's still effective. Still does what it says it's going to do. But they're now adding a safety warning, and they put a black box around it so that it gets your attention. So it is often added, depends on the drug, 10, 15, 20 years after it's been on the market, and they recognize this. And the manufacturer has to put it on the package insert on the first page.
Madam Clerk, I'd like to publish and show to everybody another exhibit that's been introduced in trial, which is 578. You just mentioned package insert in 578, once it comes up, there it is
579 was not received yet. So if you want to go back to that and do that.
579. I thought it had been.
I don't-
Okay, I move for admission of 579.
No objection.
All right, exhibit 579 is received.
I believe 578 is already in the record.
578 is in the record already. Go ahead, you can publish it. Madam
Thank you.
Clerk.
And so this is an example of a package insert for
It
baclofen.
has the clinical pharmacology indications, like when you should use this drug, contraindications, other things. It goes through dosage, how it's provided, so many milligram tablets, goes through the recommendations, and they have to get approval for the FDA for these. They can't just say, hey, I'd like to give you 5 milligrams for 20 days. These go through a long process at FDA approval. They eventually agree, and then this is what gets put out. That doesn't necessarily mean your physician follows these, but this is what the FDA wants them to follow.
And I see on the right side that there's, for example, signs and symptoms of overdosage and things like that, including disorders, coma, respiratory depression, seizures,
Yes.
vomiting. Is that all accurate information from your knowledge of the drug?
Yes, I should tell you, the seizures are slightly different.
Okay.
Baclofen, as I said, is used in cerebral palsy and people with spasticity, and they put in a pump. So they put they insert a pump under your skin. And so you get this very small amount regulated by the pump for months, and then you come back in and they refill the pump. If your pump goes dry, you'll get seizures. They're very difficult to treat. So if you do an overdose, it's kind of in the wrong place, but they have only so many places they can put this. When you get an overdose, you get respiratory depression, coma, you can get death. But the seizures are from withdrawal, and it's a very specific withdrawal. These patients that have these unique pumps, and they are, there's just a number of people that have these because maybe a spinal cord injury, maybe a cerebral palsy. There are a number of these that just have spasticity and it's painful. So they just leave that pump in and they just shut it down. And if the pump goes bad, the battery goes bad, runs out of baclofen, for some reason stops putting baclofen in, they can get seizures.
Okay. I see there's a section on the, I guess it would be the left side, about precautions. Do you see that?
Yes.
And is that significant, that first paragraph of precautions?
Yes, very much so.
So can you explain what that says to the jury, what that means?
Patients should also be cautioned that the central nervous system effects of baclofen may be additive to those of alcohol and other CNS depressants.
What does that mean to be additive to other CNS depressants and alcohol?
1 + 1 = 3.
Okay.
Synergistic.
So it really increases the
Yes.
effect. Is that fair?
Yes.
Okay. So baclofen was found in Miss Hernan, true?
Yes.
Now, should there have been from your review of the medical record, should there have been any baclofen in Miss Hernan?
No.
And that would be why?
It's about 9 months before, but don't quote me on the exact date, but a little within a year or so, there's a mention in the medical record where she tells her provider she can't take baclofen, and they discontinue it.
So she should have had 0.
Correct.
All right. Well, let's talk about the other drug that you said caught your attention as being pretty significant, cyclobenzaprine.
Yes, it's got another name, a brand name called Flexeril, and it is another skeletal muscle relaxant. It uses a different mechanism. It's a tricyclic mechanism and a sodium channel issue.
And can you tell us about, well, in that drug, should that also have been discontinued or not in her system?
It should have been 0 because there's also a mention she said she's gaining weight. One, she got a rash, and she discontinued both of those.
Now, before we get to what calculations you made, I want to just ask you, when you looked at the drugs that were in Miss Hernan and the levels that were in her gastric fluid or in her blood, did you ultimately try to determine how many pills she must have ingested to reach those levels?
Yes.
Okay. Now, cyclobenzaprine should have not been 0 because she discontinued it.
Yes.
Are there side effects from cyclobenzaprine?
Yes, it's a CNS depressant.
So,
Makes you drowsy, confused. Sorry. It'll affect your blood pressure. Eventually, as the level goes higher, initially you get a tachycardia, but then you get a hypotension because it's the sodium channel poisoning. There's sodium channels on the heart. So it does affect your heart and your brain. In the brain, it's don't know if anybody's ever heard of tricyclic antidepressants like amitriptyline.
Yes.
It's almost the same. It's just one lacks essential ring and the other one doesn't. One amitriptyline has a double bond on the essential ring. Cyclobenzaprine has a single bond on the essential ring. It's very nearly identical to amitriptyline, a tricyclic antidepressant.
So if I show you what's already in evidence, well, our exhibit is 538. Maybe this is NMS lab report. Maybe the state has a different exhibit. We have it as 538. Can you take a look at that in front of you in a minute?
Let's use let me just find the number because I do want the exhibits that have already been introduced.
All right.
You're talking about the toxicology report, exhibit 35?
I think it's 35 then. We'll use that.
No, you can keep that for your use. Thank
Okay.
you.
All right. I'm showing you and I'm showing the jury too, publishing exhibit 35. Do you see it on your screen?
Not yet.
Okay. It'll be there
Oh,
momentarily.
there it is. It's gone. Yes.
Is that an NMS lab report issued August 7th of 2019?
Yes.
And you're familiar with this report, you've studied it.
Yes.
So going through, let's go backwards on baclofen. What's the result for Ms. Hernan's blood for baclofen?
1.1 micrograms per milliliter. It's
Okay,
pretty high because everything else is in nanograms per milliliter.
I
There are
see.
1,000 nanograms in 1 microgram. So it's a pretty large level.
Now, on their report, fair to say, when we get to page 5, there's reference comments as it relates to baclofen.
Yes.
And can you see that on the screen in front of you?
Yes.
And they talk about toxic blood concentrations are reported to range from 1.1 to 3.5. Is that right?
Yes.
Do you agree with that statement in there?
Yeah.
Okay. And Lynn Hernan's was 1.1.
Yes.
So you do consider that high?
Yes.
Is that above a therapeutic level?
About 10 times.
10 times the therapeutic level. All right. When going back to page 1, we were just talking about cyclobenzapine. Does she and she has that in her system?
Yes.
And the level is 54 ng per milliliters. Is that nanograms per milliliter?
Yes.
And that's in the blood.
Yes.
In NMS's chart of cyclobenzapine on their page 5, they talk also about side effects from cyclobenzapine. Do you see that? They call it Flexerol. I think you mentioned that term
Yes.
also. Does that seem to be accurate information there?
Yes.
So it has, those are common, or those are some side effects that could occur.
Yes. Actually, this is a pretty popular medication. It's not scheduled. It's a skeletal muscle relaxant. So for people with muscle spasms, this is often given to them.
When you say not scheduled, what does that mean?
The FDA approves drugs for safety and efficacy. And they say it is safe to use and it is effective for this, whatever you want your drug to be used for. The DEA affects only abuse. And so there are 5 schedules, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And the DEA is solely after the level of abuse this sees in the public, or are people abusing this? And so you'll get on the scheduled drug, opiates, benzodiazepines. There's a number of drugs on the scheduled drugs. Flexerol's not on the schedule.
Let's move to ropenetrol. You mentioned that drug.
Yes.
That's also in Lynn Hernan's system.
Yes.
What was the result on the ropenetrol?
8.7. Is that 8? Hold on.
Yes, I think that's-
8.7.
Is her, now the first 2 drugs we talked about, the baclofen and the cyclobenzapine, we wouldn't expect to see anything in her system
No,
because the prescriptions were done with, right?
correct. And they're bad boys. I mean, those are drugs you lights up your light if you're managing a case.
What do you mean? Bad boys lighting up the case.
You might be in the deep end of the pool soon. These have potential for very serious outcomes. We might be we might have to intubate them. We might have to bring on pressors. We might, this is ones that there are certain medications, for example, ibuprofen. I don't mean to say this in a cavalier way, but I don't care how much ibuprofen you take. You can take 20. We've had People take 200, nothing happens. They get a stomachache. So they're in your brain, you kind of hierarchy these, these ones are the ones that concern you. These are the ones that don't concern you because you don't know what you're going to get when they roll in.
Well, let's talk about the ropinirole. So that's one that Lynn had a current prescription for. Is that true?
Yes.
And the level you just said is 8.7 mg per milliliter. Is that higher though than would be expected?
Yes, it is. A little higher. It's not massively higher, but yes, it is higher.
If she had taken it as
prescribed, it's probably 3 times as high or something.
okay. Do we have any side effects from ropinirole?
Ropinirole is something called a dopamine agonist. It is used in Parkinson's syndrome and restless leg syndrome. In Parkinson's syndrome in the brain, you're running out of dopamine, and so you get these jerky movements, and it's a difficult disease. This is used in that, and also in restless leg syndrome.
Lynn had restless leg
Yes,
syndrome.
so I'm assuming this was her medication for restless leg syndrome.
I pulled up page 7 of the NMS lab report with another one of their footnotes. Is 23 related to this ropinirole?
Yes.
Can you tell the jury what some of the common, well, first of all, you see the common adverse effects. I'd ask you to read it and tell us if you agree with it, with this statement of adverse effects, and tell the
one
jury.
that's concerning here is something, the last phrase, symptomatic hypotension, which means you drop your blood pressure. A lot of these drugs, again, there's synergy going on. This isn't one drug. There's a bunch of these, and we'll go through them again, but all of them are going to drop your blood pressure. Not all of them, but a bunch of them. Baclofen, cyclobenzapine, ropinirole, nifedipine, tetrahydrozoline, all 5 of them drop your blood pressure. And again, you go through this, it's kind of 1 + 1 + 1, it doesn't equal 5, it equals like 9 or 10 because they're additive, because they're coming at it from different mechanisms. One's a dopamine agonist, one's a GABA receptor effect. We're coming at it from, so your body has less other ways to maintain the blood pressure, because I keep hitting, like, I don't know how to put it, but you have a number. We got baroreceptors, increased cardiac output. We have vasoconstriction. There's a number of these that will keep the blood pressure up. You have angiotensin out of the kidneys. There's these, there's a number of mechanisms that the body uses to maintain your blood pressures. It's not one. But if we keep going after we're knocking out the legs of the stool, and eventually they get hypotensive.
Knocking it out with all these drugs, you mean, right?
Because they're coming at it from, they're knocking out several of the mechanisms that the body's using to maintain your blood pressure. That's the important one on this one.
We've got also nifedipine. Is that right?
Yes.
Now, nifedipine is on the chart from NMS, looks like it's 22 mg per milliliter. Is that right?
Yes. And there were also 3 pills found in the stomach.
What's the significance of that?
The version of nifedipine that she had is a sustained release. Nifedipine is, as it just a drug, has a half-life of about 4 hours. And it was very uncomfortable to get patients to be compliant. They had to take this drug every 4 hours throughout the day. A lot of them wanted to change drugs. So the manufacturer came up with a sustained release version. It slowly releases the drug. It's a wax matrix, and it just slowly releases like a sponge. And it just, the wax matrix doesn't dissolve. It's kind of hard to break up, but doesn't mean you don't get the drug. It's designed to release in the gastric and intestinal fluids.
So it sits in the stomach for a while and slowly
While it's
releases?
transiting to the other end, it releases it. So you only have to take 1 a day.
Okay, so you take 1 a day, and then it slowly releases, works its way through your intestines into the blood.
Right.
And then you discharge the capsule.
Yep, comes out in your poop.
Comes out in your poop. And that's what we saw in the 2 other nifedipines, right? That were on their way out of her system.
Right.
And the 3 that were still in the stomach.
Yes, ma'am.
And you identified those pills.
Yes, ma'am.
Did you find that, would you have expected to see 3 pills in her stomach?
No.
Okay.
Supposed to take 1 a day.
And
And again, it goes back to the blood pressure. This is a calcium channel blocker, and your arteries, not your veins, have little muscles around them that expand and contract. So if they contract, your blood pressure goes up. And if they expand, your blood pressure goes down. So if you need to run from the bear, they contract and blood flows very quickly. And if you relax these, nifedipine works on the calcium channels on the little muscles outside of the arteries. And it relaxes those, what are referred to as vessels, the arteries. And so they get big. And when the pipe is bigger, the same amount of fluid is going through, so the pressure is down. It's just kind of plumbing.
When somebody has pills in their stomach, that's the, is that reflected in their gastric fluid when there's testing done, for example, here of gastric fluid?
Yes, yeah, that's what they're looking for. What's in the stomach?
And what's in the stomach has yet to reach the blood.
Correct. It is not providing an effect yet.
So we test the blood, we've got levels, but then there's also additional drugs in the case of Lynn in her gastric fluid, right?
Yes,
And those have not yet made it to her bloodstream.
correct.
When I look at the NMS chart if in front of you at page 7, the reference footnote 19 talks about the nifedipine. Do you see that?
Yes,
And it talks about that last paragraph about overdose, adverse effects, headaches, hypertension, vertigo, muscle cramps, and even a couple fatalities.
yes,
Do you agree with the information in there?
yes, yes.
Okay. Is there anything else that you feel is important to mention about nifedipine?
Just that again, thinking about a stool with 3 legs or 5 legs, even 5 legs, we keep knocking out one of the stool legs. We keep knocking out one of the stool legs. And the blood pressure is going to drop. You're running out of quivers in your arrow. I mean, your arrows in your quiver to support this blood pressure.
So that's what's happening with all these pills in this case. You're knocking out the legs of the stool with all
Yes,
these
you've got
pills.
baclofen, ropinirole, alprazolam, hydrocodone a little bit, but nifedipine and tetrahydrozoline and cyclobenzaprine.
All right.
I mean, you just kind of go down the list.
Well, that's what I'm.
But their main thing is they have different mechanisms. Again, baclofen is working on the GABA receptor. Nifedipine is working on the actual arteries, the little muscles that shrink and contract the artery. Cyclobenzaprine is working in the brain. We can go through this. Same with hydrocodone. Hydrocodone is working on the mu receptors.
All right.
But everyone is, they're all different mechanisms, and it just makes it more difficult to support these people.
Is it important that physicians understand the interaction of drugs with one another so that they can be careful in prescribing drugs to a patient?
Yes,
Because they have to take into account these side effects, potential side effects.
it's a very important case. Alprazolam and opiates, hydrocodone, a black box warning came out in 2021 specifically for that. Xanax, which is alprazolam, came out in I think 1980 or 1981 or something. The black box warning came out in 2021. So they've been prescribing that for 40 years almost. But then they came out and specifically said, do not mix benzodiazepines, that's the alprazolam, with opiates, that's the hydrocodone, because they specifically cause a 1 + 1 = 3 on your respiratory center, and you start to get respiratory depression and or you stop breathing. But alprazolam's been out there for decades, and when the fentanyl and the opiate crisis and everything came out, it was noticed, and so there's now a black box warning on alprazolam.
Okay. And she had alprazolam in her system, right?
Yes,
We can see that on the chart at 67 nanograms per milliliter. Is that right?
yes,
And that exceeds what her expected blood level would be if taken as prescribed.
if taken as prescribed. Yes.
You could take that. Oh, no, I'm going to go down. That's okay. Keep it up, please. I will just go down to footnote 5 on the NMS lab report, and there is alprazolam. Are there any footnotes or comments here that you think are important to mention to the jury?
Yes.
Okay.
The second sentence of the last paragraph, it says, with other central nervous system depressants, such as ethyl alcohol, that's like alcohol, and alprazolam can become toxic at lower concentrations. That's MNS report, but the FDA black box warning is the package insert, and the FDA goes farther and says these shouldn't be mixed.
Okay. Let me show you. You talked a little bit about black box warnings. I'm going to show you. Well, I think I heard you say that alprazolam, common term for that is Xanax. Is that right?
Yes. yes.
Okay. And
It's
I'll
the brand name.
show you exhibit 580. Has that been admitted into evidence yet? 580?
Which exhibit?
580?
Yes.
Okay,
It has.
then we can just publish this. I'll show you in the jury 580, when you talk about a black box warning for alprazolam, i.e. Xanax, is that what we're looking at here?
Yes,
And they have the big black box around it, right?
correct. And you'll see that it was approved in the United States, just above the black box. You see it was approved in 1981.
Right here where I have my cursor.
Right, but just below, the recent major changes are, and they specifically say black, boxed warning. They don't call it black box. We call it black box. But boxed warning was put in 2021.
Even though it was approved since 1981.
Correct.
That can, I'm going to just go back to, you know what, we'll keep the exhibit, my screen up, please. Just moving back to exhibit 35. She had hydrocodone in her as well.
She did.
And did, in her level was 15, it looks like, nanograms per milliliter. Is that right?
Yes.
Are there?
And you should know that one right above it, the hydrocodone
Yes.
or hydrocodone is, that is just a metabolite of hydrocodone.
Okay.
And they're both active. In fact, hydrocodone is sold in some countries as a pain medication. It's approved. It's not approved in the U.S., but it's approved in other countries as a opiate pain medication. So that they're additive. The 7 + 7 + the 15 are the same thing for the most part. They're both active. Mu receptor agonist is a fancy word, but it binds to the opiate receptor. Mu means morphine, but they bind to the morphine receptor in the brain, and they both do. And so she's had, they say hydrocodone free, and then hydrocodone. That is part of the hydrocodone has already gone through the liver and been metabolized and come out as hydrocodone. But they're the same drug for the most part.
I see. So she's got it in.
They're additive, so it's about 20.
Oh, adding them. You add them together. You consider them together.
Yes.
Okay. Now, does this, you've been talking about the central nervous system or the CNS. Does this affect that?
Very much so.
Okay.
Plus CNS depression or drowsiness, confusion, coma, how far you go. And it also affects respirations. And so you slowly reduce your respiratory rate. So it's we used to think, if you're just sleeping, I don't care. But if you're not breathing, I do care.
Some of these footnotes, like hydrocodone, where they talk about it's more toxic than codeine.
Yes, those are morphine equivalents.
Okay.
They're used, there's a morphine equivalent table for physicians prescribing this. And you should have only so many morphine equivalents per 24-hour day for your patient. So they try and because they're all different medication, they're all slight different dosages. And so the CDC and the FDA have come up with a morphine equivalent table where you can go in and plug in hydrocodone, 1 milligram or 5 milligrams, and you'll get a morphine equivalent. And then you can use that table to say, okay, I can give so much of this safely.
I see. And this is an opiate, right?
Yes.
Okay.
That's why they convert it to morphine.
Okay. Now, when these footnotes talk about things being toxic doesn't mean death, right?
No.
Toxic means what means what?
Untoward effects are occurring on you from this substance. Everybody doesn't die. We, as I said, we'd lose about 40, but that meant we saved like 39,960. So no, it does not mean death. We're usually pretty good.
And then there was also found in Lynn tetrahydrozoline. True?
Yes.
And do you see a level of tetrahydrozoline in her?
Yes.
And that's an over-the-counter medication, isn't it?
Correct.
And that comes in eye drops. We've been talking in this trial about Visine.
Mm-hmm.
Is that right?
Yes.
But you can buy it in. It's not just found in Visine, right?
No, you could go to like CVS and get CVS brand eye drops with tetrahydrozoline in them, or you could go to Walgreens and get Walgreens brand. They're usually right next to each other, and they say comparable to Visine, that sort of thing.
And we grabbed a few bottles from the store that we could find. It's okay. Do you want to see any? No. I'm going to show you some eye drops that we've marked as 631 through 635. Just have you take a look at them. show them to the district attorney first.
Sorry, I haven't seen these.
I understand. And so you said that you can find other eye drops with tetrahydrozoline at the store besides just Visine.
Yeah, they're generic versions, usually a little cheaper than the brand name Visine.
And then
They're usually kind of on the shelf next to them saying, at least in my CVS, it says comparable to, that sort of thing.
And then there's other eye drops out there that don't contain tetrahydrozoline, true?
Correct.
Okay. So I'll just show you, may I approach the witness, Your Honor?
Go ahead.
Thank you. Exhibit 631 through 635. And if you could just take a look at these, I guess I'll turn them over. And if you could look to see if, for example, these sample of 5 boxes contain tetrahydrozoline.
Yes. Yeah, 0.05%. Yep. Yep. Yes, they all have 0.05 tetrahydrozoline.
Okay, thank you. Move for admission, Your Honor, of exhibit 631 through 635.
Exhibit 631 and 635 are all received. You still need the exhibit that's up?
Let me see if I've covered my. Yes, I still need that. Because we're talking about tetrahydrozoline. And so you saw that the level of tetrahydrozoline in Ms. Hernan as well.
Yes.
Now, what do you have an opinion about that level of tetrahydrozoline in Ms. Hernan? There shouldn't be tetrahydrozoline in her. Is that fair?
That is fair.
I mean, maybe a little bit if you're.
Should be like less than 1 if she's using them for eye drops, like putting it in her, what we call tear duct.
And there's some indication in the NMS lab notes of problems with tetrahydrozoline, right? The reference comments number 24.
Okay. Yes.
And do you have experience in knowledge about this particular drug, tetrahydrozoline?
Yes. I've published, I think, 3 or 4 papers on it.
You published on tetrahydrozoline.
Yes.
Okay, and we can take the, we don't need the screen anymore at the moment. Can you, let's talk about you publishing about tetrahydrozoline. But I think before we do, I would like to show you an exhibit 628. Let me get this down.
Oh, yeah.
Can you see 628 in front of you?
I can.
And,
Stop.
I don't think so, Joel. I don't think so.
There we go. Results.
okay, but I just want to know if you're familiar with it.
Yes.
And this is an abstract that seems to be authored by Sherry Kasinko
Yes.
and Michael Lamb?
Yes.
And you reviewed this abstract
Yes.
and it's marked, would you agree, at 628? Did you see the exhibit number?
No.
Oh, let me find it. There it is.
Yes. Yes.
Are you able to talk about this abstract?
Yeah.
Okay, move for admission of 628. This was the referenced in the state's case.
I think it's already in evidence.
No, I didn't see it in evidence. And I will introduce it that way.
Correct. The abstract has previously been received as Exhibit 216.
Okay. Well, then we'll bring it up under 216. And my apologies, I do see that. There we go. All right.
Do you want that published?
Yes, please.
Go ahead.
Do I have the right part of this abstract
Yes.
up?
Just the results are the important part. Don't go too far down that.
No, I'm just.
Yeah, results right there.
Okay. So this is not a fully written article. We heard from Dr. Kaczynko when she was here. She said it's just an abstract.
No, when you go to a scientific meeting, which is what an abstract is, you're going saying, hey, I want to present something I found. You send it in. The peer reviews, I review for many of these meetings, the European meeting, the North American Congress of Clinical Toxicology, a bunch of meetings. Basically, all you're saying is, should it be seen here or not, that sort of thing. You don't go through peer review like you do when you put it in a journal. Then there's back and forth and there has to be answers.
So this wasn't peer reviewed.
In the sense of, if you're an academic going for academia, no. Like if you were in academia, published papers through peer review are part of how you are assessed, in your status. These are not considered part of that.
Dr.
It's not
Kachenko-
considered. I know I go through it too, but
Dr. Kachenko said it agreed that it had not been peer reviewed.
Okay.
All right. Now, I would like you to talk about this article and the results. Do you have an opinion about the results that she's reported
Yeah.
in this abstract?
there's some real problems.
Tell us about those real problems.
All right. Right in the middle of the screen, it says PM. That means post-mortem. Okay. Next to PM, it says 112. That is the N. And that's how you say how many cases I've got. I have 112 cases. Okay. Then the next one is the mean. And a mean is you take all these numbers. If there's 112 of them, you add them all up and you divide by 112, and it's the average. Okay. But the mean is a poor way to look at things because one outlier, I'll give you an example. If I have a level of 1, 1, 1, and 100, the mean of that is 28. But three of them are 1. What you want to do when there's an outlier like that, you take what's known as the median. Okay. And that's the second number. You see the median, and then range. And the range will show you that. But the median is 1.7. The median is exact. She has 112. So 56 of those cases are less than 1.7, which is the level that you get by putting eye drops in your eye. So even though they're found in these people that are postmortem, they're effectively clinically meaningless. And that half of hers are less than 1.7. What this tells me is she's got a great lab that can find things at picograms per milliliter. And I respect National Medical Services for their expertise. But this doesn't show you. And the mean is 20. We've got kids with levels of 20. We can go through that, published papers in peer review that are fine, essentially. And then finally, there's the range. And that's the third one over. And it says, and this is what she's talking about, post-mortem, 0.19 to 290. That suggests there's an outlier out there, 290, that has thrown the median off like just. So it gives her a median that's like much higher than the rest of these really are. You know, if you go through this in peer review, you would have, and I do peer review, I would have to have her show me these numbers, like the real numbers, because this smells of statistical trickery is the best way to put it. When you go through, and I do a lot of statistics, and you can kind of like, there's three types of lies or something, but one is lies, damn lies, and statistics or something. You can do a lot, but I'm trying to point out to you, teach you, this one is statistical trickery. The median is the one you want to look at. That is the meaningful one, and it's 1.7 out of 112. And you look at the bottom of it is the range is 0.19. So 58 of those are between 0.19 and 1.7. And those are levels that you get, we can bring out the paper, if you put eye drops in your eye. Those are not clinically significant. And so I have a real problem with this because I think we're playing with statistics. And that's why you go through a peer review, because this is what's caught. Someone else who is an expert in the field that does statistics looks at this and says, wait a minute, show me this. And so they have to put the whole table out, all those 112 people, and show you where these are. And you require them to say, okay, most of these are clinically insignificant. You make them put that in the paper because they are. So that's the problem with these. And the others are DUID, which is driving under the influence of drugs. And again, they found it, but if you look at these numbers, again, 0.64, that's the level that you get with eye drops in your eye. And we have the paper, 0.10 to 0.54, 64. All of those are levels that you get if you use Visine because you have dry eyes. She has an excellent laboratory that can get to not only nanograms per milliliter, she can get to picograms per milliliter, 1/1,000,000th of a gram. But that doesn't mean it was doing anything. We're finding it, but it's an over-the-counter drug that people use. It's like saying I found acetaminophen at this very low level. 60% of the people probably have Tylenol in their house. That sort of thing. So that's why I have a problem with this, is that when you actually see the results, it would not fly in peer review.
Okay, I'm going to move to a different subject, Judge. If we're going to take a morning break, this could be a good time.
I think you are correct. It would be an excellent time for a mid-morning break. All rise for the jury. We'll take about 15 to 20 minutes. Thank you.
Seems it's a case report published in the journal Forensic Science.
This is my note. Just about that. Just put it here. Okay. You know what it's about. Yeah. Use that and then ultimately we'll read it and update it because yeah, we'll have plenty of time.
Okay.
You're more than welcome down here anytime. Yeah, 1.25 because I mean, come on. I think we can all bear with 1.25, especially with the people speaking. So we're probably about 2 hours behind. He's on cross now.
Thank you, everyone. Please be seated. And Attorney Kukler, when you are ready, go ahead. You may
It's
continue.
finished, I think.
Thank you. So you talked
It's
earlier
finished.
today about the fact that you've published, and we see on your CV page after page of publications. Let's just focus on a few today that are applicable to this trial. Okay. I'm going to show you on your screen. Hopefully you can see a document I've marked 546.
Yes.
You see that?
Yes.
And now I'm going to the top of this. This seems, it's a case report published in the Journal of Forensic Sciences, entitled Drug Facilitated Sexual Assault Using Tetrahydrozoline. Are you the number one author on this paper, this publication?
Yes.
All right. And you recognize this as your publication?
Yes.
Move for admission, Your Honor, 546 and request to publish.
No objection.
Exhibit 546 is received. Permission to publish is granted.
Just wait 1 minute while everything pops up on all the screens. So this is an article authored by you, and it looks like Dennis Seward. Is that right?
Yes.
So what's the significance of this paper that you published, sir?
Tetrahydrozoline was being used as a Mickey Finn, drug facilitated sexual assault. It would be put in people's drinks. The alcohol and the tetrahydrozoline would kind of knock them out or make them compliant. There would be a rape. And it wasn't on, the FBI keeps a list. When you go for, say, going to the emergency room for a rape check, there's a FBI approved list of what you should check for if you can. And this wasn't on it. So what we were trying to do, these are clearly drug facilitated sexual assault, but we were trying to alert them that this was a widely used drug that was being in bars and other things, kind of to get compliance for sexual assault. And so this was, and we were successful. It was added to the list of urine tests when you come in for a rape check.
When somebody comes in for a rape check, usually is urine what is collected rather than blood?
Yes, they will collect blood, but often it's too late to find things in blood.
Why is that?
A number of substances leave the blood quickly, depending on what it is, how long it's going to be there. But we can find it in urine for days. And so that's usually, they will collect blood, especially if it's recent. But often these cases, they'll come in, it was last night, and they wake up the next day and they talk to a friend, and a friend says you have to go in, and there's a whole bunch of stigma with it. But they do get in, but there is a delay. So often it's a number of hours before they get in there. And so urine is likely the best sample.
And so your goal was to make tetrahydrozoline one of the drugs that would be tested for routinely, as I understand it.
Yes,
Okay, when somebody's coming in on a sexual assault.
correct.
And you were successful in getting that added.
Yes.
Does this discuss anything to do with the levels of THZ in blood?
No, we have urine because these two patients, again, are this like 12, 14 hour later, they wake up in nude in somebody's house and they get dressed. It's a whole, it's very difficult. And often they don't come directly to the ER. Sometimes they do. Sometimes they're brought to the ER by family or those sort of things. So we did not have blood. We had urine.
And so these are people that have alleged that they've been sexually assaulted. They wake up and then eventually make their way to a police station or a hospital.
Yeah, the hospital.
The hospital. So does everyone who comes in that situation require some sort of medical intervention?
No. I mean, the intervention is they'll do, for instance, a vaginal swab for semen. There's a number of other things. But when you're talking about intervention, say, I need to support your blood pressure or something like that. No, they're awake by this point. Okay. So the interventions are forensic to document that this assault occurred.
I'd just like to show an exhibit to the witness, Madam Clerk. 540, I'm showing you what's marked as exhibit 547. Do you see that exhibit sticker? And is this one of your published articles?
Yes.
I move for admission. 547, request to publish.
No objection.
Exhibit 547 is received, permission to publish granted.
So this looks to be another article about tetrahydrozoline.
Yes.
You've studied it and you've written about it.
Yes, this was an adult woman, I believe 18. Her father was a pharmacist, and he kept tetrahydrozoline for when he was shaved, it would stop the bleeding. It's like a styptic. And she thought it was the mouthwash, so she just takes this big mouthful. And then they find out that it's not the mouthwash. So we brought her to the ER.
And what was the result for her?
She was drowsy. We watched her for 36 hours. She had something called orthostatic hypotension, which means your blood pressure and heart rate change if you're supine, flat, sitting up, or standing up. If you've ever heard of people say, when you take this medication, don't stand up quickly, you'll get dizzy.
Yes.
That's orthostatic hypotension. That's what it does. So if you stand up suddenly, your blood pressure drops, your heart rate increases. And so we said this does cause that. But as long as she was lying down, she was fine.
And
we have the amount she drank. It was about an ounce.
And so the case report is called prolonged cardiovascular effects after unintentional ingestion of tetrahydrozoline. Is that right?
Yes. She thought it was mouthwash until her dad informed her it wasn't.
And she was fine. She lived.
Yeah, she was a little dizzy,
Okay.
and especially if she stood up. So we had her lie in the bed, and every 6 hours we'd stand her up, and she'd get a little dizzy. So we kept her for 36 hours. We didn't do anything except watch her and measure her blood pressure and heart rate.
Did it require any special medical intervention?
No.
Please off the screen, please. I'll have to show the witness only. I'm going to show you, Mr. Spiller, what I have marked as 548. Do you see that sticker?
Yes.
And then I'll take you to the top. Is this also an article that you authored?
It is. It has the
this-
same mechanism as tetrahydrozoline.
Just
This is-
one
I'm
minute,
sorry.
please. Before you start talking about it, Your Honor, I'd move for admission of 548 and request to publish.
No objection.
Exhibit 548 is received, permission to publish granted.
So before you talk about it, it looks to me like you wrote this back in 2004.
Yes.
So you've been looking at this this substance of Xanax back in 2004.
Yes.
Is it Xanax or?
That is Xanax, tizanidine, and it has the same mechanism of action.
Okay.
It is a central alpha agonist, and they affect the same receptors. Central alpha receptors that are in a place called the locus ceruleus and the cardiovascular center. So areas of your brain.
What's the significance of this article?
This is just very similar medication, and this is what happens when we look at several hundred of them. They don't die. They can get drowsy, where we keep close watch on them, but basically a day later we let them go.
I'd like to show the witness only. Do you see exhibit 551?
Yes.
And this is a case report also by you involving fetal cyclobenzaprine overdose with postmortem values. Is that right?
Yes.
I move for admission, Your Honor, of 551.
No objection.
Exhibit 551 is received, permission to
Can you tell us
publish
about-
granted.
Thank you, Your Honor. Could you discuss this this article and this case report?
These are two cases, case one and case two, that took an overdose of cyclobenzaprine and died. One had ethanol, and I think one didn't. Yeah, one just had cyclobenzaprine and one had ethanol and cyclobenzaprine. But these are cyclobenzaprine. I mean, this is, what year is this? 2003. We've been looking at these for decades.
The dangers of cyclobenzaprine.
Yes,
So you have people, cases that you're personally aware of and that you've written about of people dying of that alone,
yes,
or mixed with alcohol dying of that.
yes.
And we have that in this case, right?
Well, we have CNS depressants, baclofen, alprazolam, hydrocodone. There are a number of them.
You could take this exhibit down. I'd like to show you exhibit 626. Do you see that exhibit sticker?
Yes,
And this is an article that you co-authored with others?
yes,
It's a report. Is that fair?
yes. This is NPDS, which is the National Poison Data System.
Okay, 1 minute.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. You're under move for admission of 626 and request to publish.
No objection.
Exhibit 626 is received permission to publish. Granted.
Go ahead now. Tell us about this.
Okay. All poison centers electronically supply their cases in real time to a national database. The FDA and the CDC also monitor this database along with the poison centers. There are roughly 2 million cases in NPDS per year. When I talk about my center had about 38 to 40,000 each year. When you add up all 55, there's some bigger, smaller ones. There's roughly 2,000 cases. If you're a director of a poison center, you have access to this. So you can go in and ask questions that we don't have answers to yet. So we're looking at, what's changing, what we're seeing, a number of other things. And the over-the-counter analgesics, this is specifically aspirin, which you know as aspirin, acetaminophen, which you know as Tylenol, and ibuprofen, which you may know as Motrin. So we looked at those three in that database over 19 years, 2000 through 2019. So we can get trends over decades, trends over across the U.S. Are there trends over gender, trends? I mean, we look for everything.
I'm going to show you, could you take that down, please? A state is, well, actually, there it is. I have it right up handy. You can put it right back up again. State's Exhibit 211 that's been introduced in this trial. Do you see this? And have you seen this before?
Yes. Didn't study it a lot, but yes, it was someone else's exhibit.
That's right. If you'd like a hard copy, if it's easier to read, I have one here I could give you.
I can see it, I think.
All right. Are there, as far as you know, looking at this?
I have to sleep till the end. No, I didn't.
Do you know? Just see if I have the right exhibit up.
Yeah.
There's another one. Yeah. There's couple copies of 211 in the. Excuse me a minute, Madam Clerk, while I find the other one. Two 211s. Just bring up, I think, what is a larger version. There we go. Okay, we can bring it back up again. This is maybe a little easier to read, right?
Sure.
Okay. Now, without getting into a particular case name, are you familiar with some of the information that's on this chart?
Yes, yes.
Are there items in this chart that you believe are error or
Objection. Sustained. Rephrase.
do you have information, personal knowledge of information that would suggest that some of this, the information related to, for example, a suspected homicide, may be in error?
Objection as for sidebar.
Sidebar, please.
Sidebar, what we gonna do?
Can I just ask, as a director,
We're in sidebar. Milk taco. Erin didn't come back. Erin's not come back, but this judge is. Because John's singing out. Because she's gorgeous, and I'll do anything for her. Because she's gorgeous.
The objection is sustained. The prior question is struck. The jury will disregard that question and any attempt to answer it at this point. Please move on.
we will move on. Without talking about specifics in the Exhibit 211, can I just ask, as a director of Poison Center, or in the work you do you work on cases such as those that are mentioned in Exhibit 211, without going into any specifics?
Yes.
You have familiarity because you look at records and you deal with the hospitals directly.
Yes, they have to call us directly.
We heard testimony in this trial early on about a study that was done with where levels were measured in subjects by actually putting eye drops in their eyes.
Yes.
You familiar with that particular study?
Yes.
Is that one of the ones that was on this chart too?
Yes, the third one down, Carr et al.
We could publish this. I think it's okay. So the third one down, are you talking about?
Go to the next page.
Oh, all right.
It's like in the middle, Carr et al. 2011.
Carr et al.
It's like right in the middle.
Okay. I see it right there. Right there where I'm highlighting Carr 2011.
Yes.
All right. I'm just going to ask that this be taken down so I don't show anything else. Can you tell the jury about what you know about that particular study?
Yes. Because we had gotten it on the list of things to check for in drug facilitated sexual assault, there were people saying, how do you know that level means what? So that study basically put eye drops in and said, you know, here's the blood level you'll get and the urine level you'll get if you're just using it like directed. It was to give people a level that they could say, you know, it's way over this, you know, it's not the defense saying she used eye drops, you know, can't be valid. So they were just, again, this is toxicology, so we can't do everything we want. But this one was used specifically to give a, being we had gotten it on the urine list, now you had levels that said, you know, above, here's a normal level if you're just using eye drops.
It seems important to know that because I think it's maybe a surprise to people that you put eye drops in your eyes and it can end up in your bloodstream.
Visine never applied for as an oral medication. They did not apply to the FDA, and the FDA did not require blood levels or urine levels or anything. They require safety and efficacy. So there are no studies during the application of Visine and others to get it approved as a ocular drop. And so they were just kind of almost all other drugs, certainly all the drugs that you're either injecting or ingesting, you know, and you go to the FDA, you're going to have these clinical trials. You're going to say, if I give you 1 milligram once a day, 2 milligrams once a day, 3 milligrams, this is what you'll see. This is what we'll find in the urine. This is how long it takes to clear. These are whole things that, you know, you've got to have so that you know what, do I repeat the medication 4 hours later or the next morning, or there's a whole bunch of stuff. Visine has none of that because it's just a topical. And so that data doesn't exist.
But we have a little bit of data.
Yes.
And I heard some testimony, I think, if I heard it correctly, that Visine is banned in France. Do you know anything about
that? That is not true.
That's not true?
No, what it is each country approves their own medications. There's no national you know, here. We have the FDA, you know, but like I would work in South America, in Ecuador and Guyana, and you couldn't get hydrocodone down there, but you could get hydrocodone. they approved hydrocodone, but not hydrocodone. I don't know why, but they do. Each country has its own judgment, its own regulatory mechanism. And in France, there are other vasoconstrictors. There's nefazoline, which we know as Afrin spray.
Yes.
There's a bunch of these others. There's 3 of them that I'm blanking on the third one, but nefazoline and Afrin, tetrahydrozoline and Visine that you can use for this purpose. And they do have nefazoline in France. They just said we don't need another one. So the company, by then it was probably off label, so they weren't going to be able to be the only producer of it. And it's an expensive proposition to go through these. And so they just never did. So it's not sold in France, but it's not banned in France. It's just never been approved.
Now, you, as part of your work in this case, did you calculate as best you could how many pills Lynn Hernan ingested in order to have the levels she had in her system?
Yes, I used both the blood level and the gastric fluid level, because several things. One, gastric fluid level is relatively simple. We know it's 300 milliliters. We know it's so many milligrams. Simple math. But in blood levels, all of those other medications have clinical trial studies, as I've been kind of explaining. So when they went to the FDA, when they wanted to say, I want 5 milligrams a day, twice a day, I want 50 milligrams once a day, whatever they did, whichever drug it is, they had to have numerous clinical trials to show, this is what you're going to get. Those are all published. So you can go and say, if you give me 20, volunteers, and I give them, and they get, you go in basically it's you're locked in for 3 days, so you can't go anywhere. And they feed you and stuff, and then they give you the medications, and they just draw your blood and get your urine, they get your feces. They ask you if you have any side effects, and at the end they give you a check. They love college students. College students need money.
So is that something, calculating the number of pills that a person may have taken to reach certain levels, is that something that you're qualified with your training and experience to do?
Yeah, we teach the medical residents that because, for example, 15-year-old to come in and say, I took 10 Tylenol, and we see this blood level, and we're like, you didn't take 10 Tylenol. So we teach the residents how to calculate how much Tylenol would it get to that blood level, and so we turn around and you can go back to the bedside and say, no, this is at least 50, this is not 10, and they get a little more honest, but it's part of what we do.
I'm going to show you, please, the witness only exhibit 622. Can you see exhibit sticker 622 in front of you?
Yes.
Is this the chart that you prepared as it relates to Lynn Hernan and your calculations?
Yes.
Move for admission of exhibit 622 and request to publish.
No objection.
Exhibit 622 is received. Permission to publish is granted.
And we'll wait for it to pop up on everyone's screens. 1 minute, please. Okay. All right. Mr. Spiller, can you explain how you set up this chart and what's on it?
The far left is the drug name. Then does it has a CNS effect? Does it make you drowsy? Does it make you decrease your respirations? Does it have a cardiovascular effect? Meaning, does it drop your blood pressure? Does it affect your heart rate? Because you can have a heart attack and be wide awake. You're going to die. So those are the key things. We look for CNS and cardiovascular because those are the things that really are what get you. And then the fourth is blood level and gastric level. And they're just from the autopsy. I just copied them over from the autopsy. The dosage prescribed, it was originally prescribed as 10 milligrams twice daily, but it was discontinued 7 months earlier. So the expected blood level is that next column, should have been 0. So to get a gastric level and a blood level, because they're different, what's in the gastric has not been absorbed yet. It's additive. You got what's in the stomach and what's in the blood. You would need a minimum of 11 to 13 tablets to do that.
And you're talking right now about the baclofen, is that right?
And so then we just go down one, and there's cyclobenzaprine. Cyclobenzaprine also has a CNS effect, and a cardiovascular effect. And again, these are additive. I don't think they talked much about the cardiovascular effect, but it's what we often fight. And then there's the blood and gastric level. And it doesn't, I don't mention here, but no, not cyclobenzaprine, that's later nifedipine. There's a blood level and then the gastric level. And then the next column is, it was also discontinued about 10 months before her death. And so the expected blood level of when she was prescribed it was 5 to 10 milligrams 3 times a day. But she wasn't supposed to be taking it. It should be 0. So to get that blood level and gastric level together, it's going to take about 10 to 15 of her 5 milligram tablets. That's to get those two together. Then ropinirole has a I apologize. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Can I get you a throat lozenge?
I'll just get this. And essentially, ropinirole, we have a just a blood level, and it was prescribed 0.5 milligrams once per day. And she started it 2.5 months before she got that. They were trying to use something for restless leg syndrome. Expected blood level is, if she were taking that 0.5 milligrams once per day, should have been around 1.5. To get to that level, it is roughly 5 to 6 tablets. And then we move down to nifedipine. Nifedipine doesn't really affect the CNS much, but it has a profound effect on the cardiovascular system. It works just on the arteries. Your arteries dilate, and so your blood pressure drops. And it's a major cardiovascular hit. We have 22 nanograms per mil in the blood and 240,000 nanograms per mil in the gastric fluid. They gave her the sustained release. That's what she was given. So you only have to take it once a day. And she's been on it. Well, it was filled 2.5 months before her death. Expected blood level is somewhere around 20 to 25, which is what we found. However, there's a bunch of nifedipine in her stomach. There are 3 nifedipine tablets. She's supposed to take 1 a day, and there's 3 intact nifedipine tablets in the stomach.
I want to just stop you with a question. One question about that. Is that a pill that you can crush?
No, it is a wax matrix. And really what it does is it's intended. It goes through the GI tract, comes out, loses its color on the outside, but it comes out looking like the same tablet at the other end, just sort of white.
Okay.
We call it a ghost pill because by the time it is taken all the way through the GI tract, it has released all of the medication it has, and you poop it out, the ghost pill. Some patients have to be told, after they're on it for a while, I keep seeing these pills in my feces, and you say that's normal.
So if Lynn crushed, if she wanted to crush pills, she wouldn't be able to crush that particular pill?
No.
Okay. All right. Want to move on to the alprazolam?
Alprazolam is primarily CNS effect. Usually it's relatively benign, but I gave it a ++ when it's taken with an opioid. That's that black box warning that we talked about. And she has, hydrocodone is next. And she has 67 nanograms per mil and 2,500 nanograms in the gastric fluid. She is prescribed 2 milligram tablet, 1 tablet as needed per sleep. So once a day, a 2 milligram tablet. If she takes that as prescribed, should be somewhere around 20, 25. I'm being very conservative here, to be very honest. I say 2 tablets, it might be 3.
You wanted to err on the side of being cautious.
It's the best way. Hydrocodone and the next one, dihydrocodeine or hydrocodone, you should add those 2 together because hydrocodone is the prescription medication. Dihydrocodeine or dihydrocodeine or hydrocodone is the metabolite of hydrocodone. So you'll only find that in the blood. You don't find it in the gastric fluid. You find the hydrocodone in the blood and the gastric fluid, but you don't find the hydrocodone in the gastric fluid because it hasn't gotten to the liver yet to be produced. But they're basically the same thing. They're both active mu receptors. And as I said, in Ecuador, that's the one they give you. They don't give you hydrocodone. She has 5 milligrams every 6 hours as needed. Expected blood level, if she's taking that, is about 10 to 15. It's probably, I said 1 to 2, because we haven't added in the hydrocodone, which we know is there, but not in the gastric fluid. And so I don't say any tablets for hydrocodone, because there shouldn't be any in the stomach, and there isn't. So it's probably 1 to 2 of Percocet. Acetaminophen is there. It's similar, positive in gastric fluid. We don't know how much. They just say positive. They do say 7.7 nanograms per mil in the blood. Oh, no. 4.5 nanograms per mil in the blood. This is the same pill as hydrocodone. It is prescribed as Percocet. So 325 acetaminophen, 5 milligrams of hydrocodone. So if there's 1 or 2 hydrocodone, it is the same 1 or 2 of acetaminophen. They're the same tablet. And then tetrahydrozoline. It has a CNS effect. It does have a cardiovascular effect. We've seen it. They'll make you orthostatic hypotension. If you get up, you're going to get dizzy. They have a gastric and a blood level. Dosage, it's not applicable because there is no dose that we're supposed to give you orally. It's so there's no accurate dose what she's supposed to be taking. Expected blood level, if using as prescribed, it's not prescribed. It's just not applicable. It's there. And then the bottom is when you add up all those tablets. And again, I'm using conservative numbers, but you have to take a minimum of 33 to 42 tablets to get to all these levels, to get those gastric levels and those blood levels. To me, this is a polydrug ingestion. This is what we see a lot. You know, you've got handfuls.
Okay, we can take down that exhibit. So it looks to your calculations, Ms. Hernan ingested, she took somewhere conservatively 33 to 42 tablets
Yes,
to reach these various levels.
yes,
We don't know, do we, precisely when she took them?
no.
But you do calculations knowing half-lives, and from all the scientific literature, you were able to give your best conclusions on that.
So a couple of things we looked at, and one is that there is still a fair amount of stuff in the stomach. Stomach is the first part of digestion. It's usually 30 minutes to about 4 hours. It keeps it in the stomach. It starts the digestive process. Stomach acids break down the proteins into amino acids, moves it into the intestines, etc. But it stays in the stomach 30 minutes to 4 hours usually, unless something stops it, like death. So I don't know when she took these, but because we have I've got 300 mils with big levels on autopsy, it's probably a couple hours before she died.
You had on that chart, and I don't think you addressed the 4.1 milliliters of Visine in her stomach, did you?
Oh, yes.
Can you bring 622 back up again?
Well, that one we could calculate
Okay.
because now we're just doing simple math. There's 300 milliliters. There's 50 milligrams per milliliter of tetrahydrozoline in Visine. You can just do the math. We can do it anywhere, and it'll give you. She took about a teaspoon. About a teaspoon is left. She obviously took more because she has a blood level, but there's about a teaspoon left in the stomach.
That's what 4.1 milliliters is, 1 teaspoon?
Yes, well, 5 technically is a teaspoon.
5 milliliters
Yeah,
is
it's
a
pretty
teaspoon.
close.
So it's a little shy of a teaspoon.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, that could come down, please. We're not able to calculate how much is in the blood?
No, because again, there are no studies using tetrahydrozoline orally. And the FDA didn't require them because it's an ocular and it was not an intended use. And so that we don't know, for instance, the volume of distribution. There are 2 studies, one of 10 volunteers and one of a 2-year-old. One has a half-life of 4.4 and one has a half-life of 6. So the half-life's probably somewhere between 4 and 6. But we don't know, for instance, the volume of distribution or a number of other things.
Well, when you talk about that number being a teaspoon, if we look at, for example, a Visine bottle,
Mhm.
which has, do you know how much
15
milliliters?
milliliters.
15 milliliters.
Right, so 3 teaspoons or a tablespoon.
So 3 teaspoons is in the bottle of Visine.
Correct.
And this would be then a third of a bottle,
Yes,
approximately.
yes.
Okay. I'd like to show the witness only Exhibit 623. Let me know if you can, when you can you see that,
Yes,
Mr. Spiller?
yes,
Is that a chart that you put together
yes.
and will help the jury understand some information about tetrahydrozoline in the blood?
Yes.
All right.
So I made it.
Okay, I'd like to move for admission of 623 and request permission to publish.
No objection.
Exhibit 623 is received. Permission to publish is granted.
In just a minute, please. 1 minute, sir, while we wait for it to show for all the jury, as usual. That is not redacted, that particular one, but I'm showing.
Okay.
Okay, Mr. Spiller, so why don't you explain what 623 is? It looks like we've got some blood levels of tetrahydrozoline, and you're discussing some of the effects at peak. Is that right?
Yes,
And these are referring to other articles that you're familiar with that you've studied, right?
yes.
Okay, take us through this exhibit, if you would, please, sir.
Okay, the first three rows are the same report. They're all Jennifer Lowry's paper. And they are all 2-year-olds, toddlers. And I have to advance that toddlers are not adults. They, when that's the first thing you do is like, think of a toddler, 2-year-old, and say, would you trust them climbing an 18-foot ladder? But you might trust an 18-year-old climbing an 18-foot ladder. The rest of their body is not quite developed. It is not mature yet. So they have somewhat of a more hypersensitive reaction, and we go with great caution in young children just because of this. I can go through many examples why, but just we don't treat toddlers as little adults. So these aren't toddlers. These are 2-year-olds. She got a toddler. At 7 hours, the level was 51.4, and at 12 hours, it was 23.6. Okay. She estimated from that, because we have 2 points on the spectrum, that the half-life was 4.4 hours.
Can you explain half-life to the jury?
Yes. Half-life is when a drug is presented to the liver, and it clears half of it in a certain amount of time, whatever the 10 hours, 4 hours, whatever it is. So say Tylenol. If I take, I have a blood level of 10 of Tylenol in 4 hours, it's going to clear 5 milligrams. I have a blood level of 200, it's going to clear 100 in 4 hours. So it takes half of what's there and it clears it. And that's why it's called a half-life. It's a pharmaceutical use because it's really meant for the pharmaceutical companies to tell them when they can redose you. Like when the blood level is going to fall and not be effective anymore. So the half-life is 4 hours. They know when they to redose. But using that half-life, going back at 90 minutes, and I think that's being cautious, is probably a full blood level at 1 hour, but I go to 90 minutes. That toddler would have had a blood level of 115 when she comes in. The reason is because, again, you can't just order a tetrahydrozoline level. Jennifer had to get this and send it off to a lab. But that child with a level of 115 going down approximately every 4 hours, 4.4 hours, put an oxygen mask on her, and that's it. Nothing for her blood pressure, nothing else. They did not intubate her. They did not have to do anything. They call it medical intervention, but trust me, we're really cautious with toddlers, especially when the parents are there. But, you know, so they have an oxygen mask on the child. He's discharged healthy the next morning. You know, and we have an estimated blood level of 115 in a toddler, which I would expect to have a more severe effect with tetrahydrozoline than an adult.
And just stopping for a second, Lynn's level was 160, right?
Yes.
Okay.
These following two are also children who came into the, this is in Kansas City, Missouri. 2 more kids came in. They drew the levels, and these are the levels at 2 hours and 3 hours. You know, oxygen by mask, observation, rapid improvement. These children do well. You know, trust me, oxygen is harmless, and we go for it. You know, you just give it to them. It's not going to hurt them. But there are things. Intubation is risky in a child. You intubate only when you have to. They're not intubated. Starting pressors and fluids to support a blood pressure is risky. You only do it when you have to. It's not done. So what we've got here is people sitting next to the bedside, very close to bedside, Peds ICU. But they basically are drowsy. And these are, this next one is, Kurczewski. Okay. This has to do with the mean and the median that we went through before. Her,
Right, we can skip that one. We've
that's the one
discussed it.
there, I described statistical trickery. There's another one. Oh, here it is. 10 cases greater than 100 nanograms per mil. However, you have to look at what the co-ingested drugs were. And you're going to see some nasty drugs there. Fentanyl, morphine, amphetamine, ethanol, diphenhydramine, delta-9 THC is probably just there. But they're not making it with, it's not tetrahydrozoline alone. These are mixed with fentanyl and morphine, we know, are part of the major opiate epidemic. Amphetamine, methamphetamine, ethanol, they're all part of this. But so you have to look at this. This is that same Kurczewski paper. She said, yes, I have 10 cases greater than 100. But she doesn't tell you manner or reason of death or anything, but she does tell you they're co-ingestants, and I just put that in there to let you know that would raise I'd be more concerned about fentanyl and morphine, to be honest. And then finally, there is one unknown urine post-ingestion. They have a urine level, and they have a blood level. They have diarrhea, vomiting, lethargy, bradycardia. All they did was observe them. There were no medical interventions. So we have these multiple people coming in where we do have blood levels, and yes, they are in the hospital. They have a doctor and a nurse at their bedside, but intervention, like I'm sticking an IV in and I'm going to put in pressors to support your blood pressure, it's not happening. I'm intubating you to get you to breathe. It's not happening. And with my sexual assault, drugs facilitated sexual assault, all these people made it through the night, wake up, get dressed, come in 12 hours later. They have no medical intervention. It is by itself, I'm more afraid of it for it's being used as a Mickey Finn and those sort of things than as a other drug. Because we do know they do that. They do it all the time.
Take down the exhibit. So on the list of drugs that Lynn Hernan ingested, do you have an opinion about what's the least toxic in your opinion? Or
That acetaminophen level of 4.5 is one tablet. It's like it took up one Tylenol.
okay, and where does tetrahydrozoline fall in the seriousness on the list of drugs in Lynn Hernan?
At the bottom.
At the bottom. Is it? Well, let's bring up your report again, and that's 545A. 1 minute. Here we go. This takes a minute. What about if somebody you said that taking tetrahydrozoline can cause a person to become dizzy, or people use it in these sexual assaults.
Yes.
What do you think about somebody taking tetrahydrozoline in a bottle and becoming affected by it to a degree, for example, where somebody could sexually assault them, and we don't have that here. But if somebody got to that level, can you imagine forcing 35 or 40 pills down their throat at that point?
No, the histories we get from them are, usually with alcohol. They're on some sort of date rape is a terrible word because it's not a date, but they're on some sort of outing, and it gets put in their drink. And their description is they start to feel really weird, dizzy, and then they have a period they don't remember. And they often say, I came back too, because you could touch these people, physically touch them. And they kind of wake up and they say, then I saw him in the bed. And then they kind of go out, and then they wake up the next morning. They have multiple awakenings. Not long, and usually not sufficient to get out of there right away.
You said that you think that the ingestion was relatively recent of the substances in Lynn.
I'm just using that there are 300 mils of gastric fluid. That's not going to be 8 hours earlier. I don't know the time. 2 hours seems fair, but I'm not opining when it happened. It's not the day before, because she still has it in her gastric fluid.
When you're looking at things at the poison center and what somebody has ingested, do you consider their health?
Absolutely.
Other things that might be going on with them,
Absolutely.
like whether they've got liver problems or heart problems, those things matter?
Oh, yeah. Do they have diabetes? Do they have what we call metabolic syndrome? Do they have heart problems? Do they got blood pressure problems? Do they have this, that? We usually try and go through the medication list. That gives us a hint. If there's a family member with them, we go through that with them, that sort of thing. But yeah, we try and find out what we're facing, because often the patient isn't all that helpful.
Do you have any information about Lynn Hernan and her health or her mobility or other factors that might affect her tolerance for medications?
Yeah, they gave me the medical records for like a year before.
Okay, so what things matter?
Well, she gained 100 pounds.
That's a big factor.
Right. She's recently put on nifedipine. The nifedipine was started, at least that's when it was filled 2.5 months before. That's a blood pressure medication. She's starting to get metabolic syndrome, gaining weight, blood pressure's going up, a number of other things.
Were you able to listen by maybe by Zoom or some other way to certain parts of this trial when the medical examiner and Dr. Kaczynko testified?
Yes.
You listened to parts
Just
of,
those two.
Just those two? Would you agree that they seem to focus on CNS changes?
Exclusively. I'm
Hold on,
sorry.
there's been an objection. Sustained as to the form of the question.
You listened to the testimony. What did they seem to focus on that we've been talking about here today?
The CNS depressant effects of the medications on the list.
What else?
See,
were you
John.
focused on?
Cardiovascular effects,
Why would that be?
because that'll kill you too.
So what about
You get 3 major organs. You have the brain, the lungs, and the heart. Your liver and kidneys, even if they fail, you probably have 5-6 days or something to live. But your brain, your lungs, your heart, you're going
Hold
down.
on, there's been an objection.
I think it's a violation of the court's order.
Be moving to strike.
Yes.
That's the case. Striking in general.
No, I understand. I'll overrule it, but caution the witness not to violate any pretrial rulings made in this case.
Yes, Your Honor. I'm sorry if I did.
No, you didn't.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Go, you can finish, but we can't talk the specific.
All right. Yes, we focus on cardiovascular because if blood pressure drops, your heart stops, you're going to be dead. CNS, you can get comatose, but the problem is if you get comatose, you often stop breathing. So that's the big thing. Are you going to stop breathing? And they focused only on the CNS and did it stop her breathing. They didn't focus on these other effects, dropping her blood pressure. And again, it goes back to that 5-legged stool. We keep knocking one leg out and knocking one leg out. Eventually, the stool's going to fall over. But you focus on those. Those are the key ones emergently. Then you take the whole picture in.
So it sounds like you're saying that what needs to be focused on really is all of these drugs. Might be called a poly drug.
I'm going to object again at this point. The suggestion violates this court's order.
Sustained, rephrase.
Did Ms. Hernan have, did she have a large quantity of drugs in her system? She did, right?
Yes.
And what when you hear the term poly drug, what does that mean?
I usually use it when it's more than 2.
Okay.
When we've got 3, 4, 5, 6, people will, empty the medicine cabinet, and they'll have 4, 5, 6, that sort of thing, because it has this additive effect. Most people don't know what's going to hurt them, so they just take it all.
You said that you have experience at your poison centers with suicides. Is that right?
Yes.
Do suicides, from your experience working decades in poison control center, do suicide rates go up or down as a person as people age?
The highest rate is in the 40s to the 60s, but I do have to caution you that adolescents 12 to 19 is rising rapidly, but historically for the past 40 years, it's 40s, 50s, 60s. But the adolescents, we're concerned about potential screen time. We don't know what it is. Is it social media? But it's increasing in adolescents since 2009.
It sounds like that's something that we got to be taking into consideration and doing research on to try to stop that.
I published it.
Did you publish on that? Okay.
We are. We try.
Have you, in your career of decades working in the Poison Control Center, seen cases of people dying from suicide by mixing drugs?
Yes.
Have you seen that in women?
Yes.
And the testimony that you've given here today, sir, is that to a reasonable degree of scientific certainty?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
All right, then this will be a good stopping point for the lunch hour, given it is 11:59 a.m. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, just the same admonition. Please do not discuss this case among yourselves. Do not do any research. Do not listen or view any news or media reports regarding the case. Enjoy your lunch.
Or if you have it, they don't always have it. As much as you can.
Thank you, everyone. Please be seated. Mr. Spiller, do you acknowledge that you remain under oath?
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you. All right, Attorney Nicolai, when you're ready then.
Thank you, Judge. Good afternoon, Mr. Spiller.
Good afternoon.
As we begin kind of talking about the things that you testified to this morning, I think it might be helpful for the jury to kind of get a picture in their head of, I think it's fair to say there's three kind of big groups of toxicologists involved in working on different things, whether it be clinical or forensic. So I want to ask you initially, you indicated that at the Poison Control Center, when you're assisting people at a hospital remotely, it would be fair to say that that's a group of people who have called to say, I need help, something has happened, and the Poison Control Center is involved, and the person ultimately survives. That's kind of one set of
Mostly everybody survives.
Okay.
Mostly everybody.
Sure. And that would, when you're doing toxicological work with people who are in a hospital and they're released, that's kind of called clinical toxicology, right?
Yes.
Now, there's kind of a second set group of people that you certainly have experience with, and that's people who, again, call for help and, seek treatment, but they don't survive, right? And they end up dying. Is that true?
Yes.
And you've been involved in a review of those kinds of deaths when the Poison Control Center is involved. Is that fair?
Yes, we have to. As the director, I have to sign off on it. So yeah, it's about 40 a year.
Okay. And I just want to be clear because you're not signing off on a death certificate in those cases, right?
No, this is third part of the review for what we call National Poison Data System. We go through 3 levels of review for fatalities to make sure that it's a fatality. The first level of review is at the center level where you gather the hospital records, the coroner's report, postmortem if you have it. They don't always have it. As much as you can, and you put it together and you say, this is what happened. On day 1, we saw them, and you progress through. They may have lived for 3 days, but eventually they succumb. Then there's a second level of review called the Fatality Review Committee. And it's like peer review for the fatalities. And I'm also involved in that as well, but I don't review my own. And so you review those and you get back to the original center because there's something missing, do you want to say? And you ultimately, at that second level, you make a determination whether it's undoubtedly related. And to be undoubtedly related, you have blood levels. Pretty much probably related. You have a clinical picture that is unquestionably a clinical picture of this overdose. This is what happens. And then they succumbed. Then there's contributory. Contributory is there may be people with significant other medical issues that this particular toxin, whatever it was, knocked them over the edge. It might not have knocked an Olympic athlete over the edge, but these people, because of their significant medical issues, they wouldn't have been in the hospital and cascaded down to ultimately death. That's contributory. And then there is not related. So you find related, probably related, or absolutely related, probably related, contributory, or not related. And that's the second level. And then the chairs of these committees This goes on for about 6 or 8 months. All of these are reviewed nationwide. They go over it again so that the data gets in there. We're most concerned about the fatalities because that's what everybody wants to know. So we do a 3-level review of all fatalities and everyone gets to see if we're not certain if it's related, if it's probably related, quacks like a duck, floats on water, it's got orange feet, et cetera, et cetera. You're like, probably related. If we got DNA and it's like, it's a duck, we're like, okay, that's definitely related. And so we go through these levels and they're spelled out.
You'd agree with me that you are not a medical examiner
Correct.
and you're not a coroner.
Correct.
And you'd agree that those are different things.
Yes.
And you are not making signatures on death certificates yourself, ever?
No.
Okay. So you'd agree with me that the review that's being done for the data that the Poison Control Center keeps and maintains is different than the process that a medical examiner would go through in making her cause of death determination for the death certificate. Fair?
Yes, there are a couple of differences, but
Two
yes.
different things.
Oh, yes.
Okay. So now everything that you talked about in the second group that you just discussed in detail, the review process of fatalities, all of those cases eventually in some way involved a poison control center. True?
If they're in MPDS, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So there's kind of a third group of people who have, let's say, ingested something, succumbed to it, and the Poison Control Center was never contacted, police were never contacted, and the person is found deceased.
Yes.
And then you would have no involvement in something like that.
Sometimes the coroner calls us and says, what is this? Like, for instance, there was a selenium death, and the coroner had no idea of what was going on with selenium. I happen to have published papers on selenium, so they contact me. But that is not that's not MPDS. That's independent, and that's one of the coroners in the state I'm in.
And let's talk about the difference between a coroner and a medical examiner. How would you describe that difference to the jury?
Coroner is an elected official, and it depends on the county and the state what determines the coroner, but you are elected. A medical examiner is a pathologist, an MD or DO pathologist, who can do autopsies and those things. So, like for instance, in Kentucky, there were a number of relatively poor counties where the medical examiner ran the funeral home.
Okay, so a medical examiner is a medical doctor. True?
Yes. Yes.
A coroner doesn't necessarily have to be a doctor of anything. True?
Depending on the law of that county.
So true?
Yeah, true.
Okay.
Whatever the law of the county says.
So you said there was one time that a coroner somewhere called you about selenium, right?
Well, I was just using that as an example, but yes, they do.
Okay. So this third group of people who are found deceased, fair to say that that process kind of involves a whole group of other people like law enforcement, medical examiners' offices, and forensic toxicology labs that the Poison Control Center is not involved with.
Most of them not.
Okay.
I mean, if they're found dead and stay dead, unless they have a particular question about a substance, when, for example, when the OxyContin issue showed up, hillbilly heroin, I get a lot of calls from the coroners out in Eastern Kentucky.
The coroners, not the pathologists.
Correct.
Okay. So you're aware that in this third group of people who are found deceased and the investigation involves law enforcement up to a medical examiner and a forensic toxicologist, that it would be very infrequent for that process to require someone like you to make reverse dosing calculations. True?
It would be infrequent. Yes.
The
I mean, it's
process that I've
usually
outlined-
not. They go to these tables that most people go to and they just look at a number and they go, boom, here it is.
So the process that I've outlined, where a medical examiner is forming an opinion about the cause of death, routinely is happening in this country every day without any toxicologist doing reverse calculations from a level in the toxicology to a dose of pills. True?
For the most part, yes. I mean, I've testified in cases where it was part of the case and we did a reverse calculation in a 2 and 4-year-old. So they do contact us when there's issues that they want us to help with, but it is infrequent.
This process of the signing of death certificates all over the nation that is happening every day, the vast majority of those determinations are being made without the knowledge of a reverse dosing calculation. Would you agree with that? Yes or no?
Yeah, I'll probably agree. Sure.
Okay. So
They
then
just go to
why
the
is
tables.
that
I'm
was my
sorry.
question. Thanks.
Sure.
So then why is it important for this jury?
To be able to complete his sentence.
The question called for a yes or no answer. This is cross-examination, so overruled.
Now, you've indicated before that the reason that it's so helpful to do these types of calculations is because these medical examiners don't know what the levels mean, right? You've said that before.
Well, they refer to tables that people have published that says, we found 4 fatalities and this is the range. And they look at theirs and they go, if that's in that range, they're like, okay, I got it. They're not doing studies on these levels. They're just referring to the tables. And if it's in that range, they got it.
But you'd agree with me that if a substance hasn't been absorbed into someone's bloodstream, it does not have an effect on that body.
I would agree. Yes.
Okay. But you're telling the jury that it's imperative for them to know how many tablets were ingested in this case. True?
I think it's helpful to understand that this is not 2 tablets or 4 tablets. This is 30 to 40 tablets.
And you said handfuls, right? Handfuls of tablets is what you testified about, right?
I'm 69. I've recently had to begin taking medications. And yes, I cannot swallow more than like 3 or 4 at once. I can't swallow 30. I'm taking my experience of trying to swallow tablets, and I'll put them out and I'll just, have to do it that way.
Yeah, and if we could please publish states 35,
Go ahead.
page 1. $35.
Thank you.
You'd agree with me, sir, that the iliac blood levels in this case
Yes.
are the levels of substances that were affecting the decedent at death.
Yes, that they found. Yes, definitely. Only what's in the blood.
And from looking at Exhibit 35 that NMS Labs has included various notes for the reader in terms of those charts, I think you call them, charts of levels, right?
Okay.
And you were asked about some of those before. If you can scroll down to page 4, they're called reference comments, and you were asked to read real specific sentences from some of them.
Mhm.
For example, this morning, looking at number 5, you were asked to read the important part of that information this morning. And to the jury, what you picked out of that to read was the last sentence. In combination with other central nervous system depressants such as ethyl alcohol, alprazolam can become toxic at low concentrations. Do you remember reading that?
Yes.
The sentence right before that, sir, says reported blood concentrations of alprazolam in alprazolam-related fatalities ranged from 100 to 400. True?
Yes.
Okay, so you're aware that these reference comments that are put on this, or any reference comment that a medical examiner might use to interpret toxicology results, are born out of these cause of death determinations being made over and over and over again, right?
Yes, I have an answer for that, but you're not asking it, so I only answer your questions.
Thank you, sir. So Dr. Jessy and every other medical examiner's office in the country is continually making cause of death determinations and signing death certificates, right? And anything involving an overdose will also involve these toxicology numbers like on page 1. True?
Usually.
Compound question. Object to a compound
Sustained
question.
is to the form of the question.
And to the MEs across the country.
It's
Yeah.
sustained.
Thank you.
If we can go back to page 1. Sir, you'd agree with me that one way that these ranges are determined is by collecting all of this data that exists during the process of making a cause of death determination.
This data isn't collected. What gets collected is published literature. They're pulling those numbers out of the published literature. They're not collecting these reports. And so there needs to be a difference between what's here and what's there. So I've done this, but the coroner, we would have a monthly coroner meeting in a medical examiner meeting in Columbus, and we would go over the cases. And we would disagree and explain to them why. They'd find cocaine on someone and said, it's a cocaine death. And we'd look at the level and say, no, it's not. And we'd explain to them this: when he called 911, he had a history of asthma. He was admitted to the hospital only 3 days before for asthma. He was calling with shortness of breath, which is asthma, and he goes in and he dies. And they're like, so they didn't know what it was. He just shows up. They do toxicology. They find cocaine. They said it's cocaine. And we're like, no, look at these levels. And so just finding a level does not mean an effect. And that's just one example. That's why they would bring us into these medical examiner monthly meetings for Columbus, where they'd also bring in police, jail, a number of other people to give their opinions on a number of things. You know,
that wasn't my question. So I'm going to kind of break it up to make it a little bit more simple. You'd agree with me that levels like this contained in forensic toxicology reports are from someone who is dead.
Yes.
And you'd agree with me that medical examiners frequently use this kind of data as a piece of their decision about cause of death.
Yes.
And you'd agree with me that when those determinations are made over and over again, researchers like yourself can use this data to publish literature about it, right?
You can't get this data. This is private data. You can't get these lists. Has to do with her. Like, I can't just go to them and say, give me all your fatalities from the last year, and I want to do this sort of thing, you know?
Sure.
So
let's go down to page 5 again, please.
So there is a difference between doing research on the postmortem levels, excuse me, and that report. So no, access to that is not widely available to anybody who just wants to look at it.
So at some point in time, someone was able to get data about baclofen deaths, and they formed that data together into a study. And the last sentence of number 9 on the page being displayed says, in a fatality attributed to baclofen, postmortem blood and urine concentrations of 17 and 760 respectively were reported. Is that what that says, sir?
Yes, it does.
So someone got that data and put it together, and it's been put in a form that's useful to a medical examiner. Fair?
Sure.
Okay.
That's before, I think, more
There's
important.
no question.
I'm sorry, I apologize.
Thanks.
I don't like this at all. The way she's been treated, I
Nothing
do
about
not
this
like
process
it.
that we've just discussed has anything to do, going back to page 1, with trying to calculate backwards what these numbers mean in terms of how many pills someone took. True or false?
True. No, I don't think they do. Which goes back to the cocaine case. We did back calculate and showed them that it wasn't cocaine, it was asthma.
In this case, you've made a couple different set of these kinds of calculations to this point, right?
I don't understand the question. I have made some calculations, yes.
So one of the sets of calculations is something that got turned over to the state back in July of 2022, and it's in your report, 545. Fair? There's calculations in here.
Mhm.
Is that a yes?
Oh, I apologize. Yes. I'm sorry.
And you'd agree with me that when you add up the calculations that you made in your report in Exhibit 545, the total tablets are 21 to 28. You'd agree with me that that's the number from your report dated July 28th of 2022.
I'm sure I did, but I don't remember. I don't
Okay.
see it.
Today, in the table that you were shown, Exhibit 622, you testified that the number of tablets is between 33 and 42, and that was a very conservative estimate. Do you remember that?
Yes.
Okay.
I added hydrocodone and ropinirole too to that list. They're there. They weren't initially included in this written report.
You'd agree with me that by definition, when you offer opinions in court, like these calculations, that is a forensic toxicology opinion.
By definition, I think anything in court is forensic.
Okay.
I think that's the definition of it.
Are you aware, sir, that there is an academy, American Academy of Forensic Sciences Standards Board, and they publish for anyone offering such opinions?
Anyone that is a
practices
member of
and-
their academy, not anyone offering such
Hold on, sir.
opinions. I
Mr.
have to
Spiller, Mr. Spiller, the question wasn't even fully asked. So I'm just going to ask that
Okay.
you wait until it's fully asked before you answer it. It's a difficult job for the court reporter. Please don't talk over each other. Thank you.
Yes, Your Honor.
Can you please re-ask?
Thank you, Judge. Sir, you're aware that the American Academy of Forensic Sciences Standards Board publishes guidelines for opinions and testimony in forensic toxicology. Are you aware of that?
Yes.
I'd like to show this witness exhibit 232, If we get unpublished, please. And just the witness. Let me know when you can see that, Mr. Spiller.
Exhibit 232?
Right.
Yes, I can see it.
And on the right side, there's actually some page number. You can tell there's 10 pages to that PDF. Is that fair?
No. Oh, yes, I see it. Yes, I see what you're circling.
Is this, do I have a copy of this?
You may not, Judge.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
I have a paper copy, Mr. Spiller, if you prefer to look at that, but you can tell there that it's a multi-page exhibit, right?
Yes,
And the title of it is what we just talked about, the Guidelines for Opinions and Testimony in Forensic Toxicology.
yes,
And you're aware of these.
yes. That's a statement by that academy. I'm not part of that academy.
And at this point, I'd move exhibit 232 into evidence, ask for permission to publish.
I'm going to object. He's not part of the academy. He has not acknowledged this document as being authoritative or that he even knows anything in it.
The objection is sustained for now. If you could ask a few more questions, please.
Well, sir, are you aware that these best practices are recommended for anyone offering opinions and testimony about the topic of forensic toxicology, regardless of what board or association they may belong to?
I would disagree, and I'm not a member of that academy. They can't speak to other academies.
I'm asking you about a set of guidelines that are published for anyone in the forensic toxicology field for best practices. So there's a board that many toxicologists probably aren't members of, but they publish these guidelines.
Yes.
Because it's important that expert testimony be constrained to areas that are based on sufficient facts or data.
Object to the state testifying.
Judge, this is cross.
Oh, she's testifying.
Let me see the attorney's at sidebar, please.
I think the prosecutor's been very dodgy, Nunya. I don't think she's been very good there. I don't think the judge has actually been very fair either here. Yeah, with it. The witness has been very honest, I think, throughout for both sides. They're trying to push stuff in that is very dodgy. And they're trying to put through documents that he can't verify. I think she knows she's fucked. Judge Sprunky, yeah, she's pissed. I don't blame her for being pissed. Both sides are playing games now. Trying to get stuff in that is not even relevant. The prosecution, he was a rebuttal witness, obviously, against this guy again. It's just like, I wish trials were just fair, that everyone was just honest and stuff. I know it's never going to be like that, but people tend to have to lie or bring in other information that has nothing to do with the trial, just because the prosecutor just wants to win. And that's shit. I hate that. Oh, don't get me wrong, the defense has been crap as well, but
And you with the mark as exhibit 232. That was the same thing that you were actually just looking at on your computer, but I want you to flip through those pages, okay? And sir, you and I have actually already talked about this document once, didn't we?
I think we had a Dahlberg hearing. Is that what you're referring to?
Right.
Okay, then yes. If that's what we're referring to, yes.
If you flip through those pages, does this look like the same document that was an exhibit at that hearing?
I don't remember. That was quite a while ago.
Have you ever seen exhibit 232 before?
It's not my society or academy. I don't keep it, no.
That's not what I asked you, sir.
Nunya, I disagree. I mean, if you could make an expert look, she's trying to make this expert look really bad. And she's trying to put documents in that he stated numerous times that he doesn't know anything about these documents. It's not part of his the regulation board or what he is a part of. So he can only attest to what he knows. So she's trying to give yes, no answers out of him rather than getting the truth, just to try to spin stuff. And it's like, why? She's trying to make him look incompetent, but he's obviously not incompetent. And you can see that he's not incompetent. And the fact that she shouts at him and says, no, it's a yes, no answer only, I just think he makes her look really bad. Now, I say the same about the defense, mind. I'm not picking on her more than I would on the defense. The defense has been awful throughout this trial. But trying to get that document in when he's done no studies on it, he said it's not what he's followed. I just don't agree with it. I just don't agree with that. He should play with equal playing field. Don't try and diminish him because he's obviously top notch at his field. She's trying to make him look like he's incompetent, but everyone knows he's not competent. He's been a great witness for both sides. I think he's actually been very fair for both sides. So it's a bit frustrating that they try to push stuff in that has no relevance to the trial. That's why I get annoyed with it. But again, I'm not just picking on her. I'm picking on her now, but I think it goes both ways. I just don't like it. But
Have I seen it before? Maybe. Yes, maybe. I'm sure. But I don't retain it to memory because there's a number of boards and I only keep track of the ones that I'm part of.
again, that's a fair answer. But she's trying still to get it in. It's like, he's just told you he doesn't know about that one. Get someone else in to confirm it and put it in.
Sir, you're a member of the Society of Forensic Toxicology, are you not?
Oh,
I was.
go again.
I've been in part of it for a while.
So you weren't at the meeting last week when this document was discussed in great detail?
That's not the Society of Forensic Toxicology. This is a different society.
It's really important for you to wait for me to finish my question because the court reporter has to take down both of our verbal indications, okay? So my question is that this association that you were a member of, the Society of Forensic Toxicology, there was a meeting last week. Do you know that?
No, I haven't been part of that society for probably 10 years.
This set of guidelines was discussed
Okay.
at that society that
Okay.
you belong to.
Used to? Yes.
At this point, I'm going to move in Exhibit 232.
No.
Well, I object based upon what I've said before. He's not a member
This is
of
ridiculous.
the society, so I'm not certain. So I stand by my objection on that.
The objection is overruled. Exhibit 232 is
I'm
received.
sorry.
Permission to publish is granted.
Ridiculous. Judge, sorry, Judge,
And
put
I'll
down my
wait till I get a thumbs up
information.
here from the jurors. It shows, there we go. All right.
I think that's atrocious.
If we go to page 3
It's atrocious.
and blow that up a little bit, can you please read the first paragraph of this page into the record, sir?
At the top 5-2. Oh, my
I'm
3
sorry,
has
what?
the appropriate opinions and testimony by a toxicologist. Am I looking at the wrong page 3? The paper copy you gave me.
Let me see if I should have it showing on the screen.
Is the paper copy double-sided, sir?
No.
Okay, so then,
Oh, probably the rebuttal witness
can you
who
count the pages with your hands and turn to the third one in the exhibit that you have, sir?
Yes.
Okay, does that
It
match
says
page
forward.
3?
Yes. That's
Okay.
what it is.
Could you please read the first paragraph to the jury?
I can't hear you.
Could you please read the first paragraph aloud to the jury?
I'm sorry. Could you repeat that?
Sure.
I've got a cold from the airplane and I'm having trouble.
Sure. Could you read that first paragraph on page 3 of States 232 to the jury, please, sir?
Yes. It is common that forensic toxicologists are called to testify in criminal and civil matters to discuss analytical results and offer their expert toxicologic opinion.
Continue.
In these legal matters, it is important that expert testimony be constrained to areas that are based upon sufficient facts or data, be a product of reliable principles and methods, and that those principles and methods are consistently applied to the facts in the case at hand.
Continue, please.
This document provides one way of ensuring that proper toxicologic testimony is allowed in legal manners by defining the general areas of forensic toxicology that are viewed as reliable by other experts in the field.
You would agree with me, sir, that nothing about what you just read indicates that there are limitations for the groups that these are best practices for.
I do not understand the question.
You'd agree with me that the paragraph that you just read does not have any kind of a limitation in terms of who these should apply to by board or society. Fair?
No, it's just that it says ASB best practices. At
It
the top of
actually
the page.
says that they should apply to people testifying about forensic toxicology. True?
Yes, but they're talking to
Okay,
their
thank you.
members. They can talk to people that aren't their members. They're not members of that society.
If we can please go down and again and again and again and the bottom of this page, please. Sir, do you see the whole section that talks about inappropriate opinions and testimony by a toxicologist?
Yes.
Can you please read item G?
A toxicologist should not calculate the dose of a drug based on a postmortem drug concentration in the blood or in blood.
Thank you. That can come down. Sir, you'd agree with me that there are a lot of pitfalls in trying to calculate a dose from a postmortem level
Yes.
because there's so many unknowns, right?
Yes, there are. And I'd like to explain some of them.
I'd like to talk about those with you too, sir.
Good.
Is one of them genetic factors and metabolization rates?
They could be, yes.
Is another one?
Yes.
Is another one of them time? Levels can be affected by time.
Yep. Well, time you're alive.
Is it your testimony, sir, that once a person dies, those levels cannot be affected post-mortem?
They don't change much. This is a big issue in postmortem toxicology. Is it postmortem redistribution? There's got to
Do
be
you believe that's a true thing or not?
in some, but not all, probably a minority. Yes. But it is enough that the solution to that has been to get peripheral blood, which they got. They got iliac blood. The solution has been not to get heart blood, which is central blood. They just take it out of the chest. The solution for postmortem redistribution has been to go for peripheral blood. And they did. They got iliac blood.
You'd agree with me that postmortem redistribution can affect the accuracy of levels in toxicology. Yes or no?
Some, not all, no.
So yes.
So there is no yes or no, some.
Response to them, yeah. In response to all the defensive choice, I did say I'm not saying that this is purely on her now. I said both sides. I played it, but what she's doing right now is diabolical. I've lost all respect. What's happening right now? I'm done. I'm done. As much as I don't like the defense, they were not this bad. Nowhere near this bad. This is horrible. And I think the judge just made a horrible call with this as well. And my respect for the judge has nosedived. This should never, ever be in evidence. I think it's diabolical. But we're all different. We all see it differently, as we say in the air. I'm not gonna I still love you to bits, but I just think this now is diabolical. Whatever respect I had for the prosecution has gone. I don't have much respect for the defense, by the way. I do think the defense are very, very bad, but I do think that they haven't taken it to this level of being obnoxious. And the way she's treated him, he's not even a hostile witness. If he was a hostile witness, I'd understand it. but he's not. So, and to get this information in, and just the judge allowing this testimony to be put in, I don't agree with it. The reason I say that as well is I don't think any of it's going to help Jessy. I don't think it's going to impact the outcome whatsoever here. You know, not whatsoever. But I do think that the way that's been handled is not good. Well, it wasn't in front of the jury though, Lilia. It wasn't in front of the jury. This is all in front of the jury. She was arguing with the defense about bringing a case from court, which she then said he was allowed to come in, which obviously they've touched upon here. But none of it was in front of the defense. This is all, defense jury. This is all in front of the jury. I just think it's appalling how it's been run. If this is going to happen, make sure the jury are out. Don't have these arguments in front of the jury. And to see how animated she was earlier on, losing her crap, I've lost all respect for her. I don't like it.
You'd agree with me that disease and illness can impact a metabolic rate in someone.
Disease and illness. Yes, up to a point, yes.
And
Depends on the disease and the illness. Really, the effect is going to be hepatic injury because that's where drugs are metabolized. So if we have significant injury to the liver, definitely. If your disease is, I have an infection in my foot, no. So it's not just disease and illness. It's what specific disease and illness and what organ are we talking about?
and hepatic is an important one, right?
Yes.
This jury even heard from Dr. Thomas yesterday that hepatic injury or hepatic steatosis would be a really important thing for someone to know about if they were doing these calculations post-mortem.
You would take it into account, yeah.
Okay.
How severe?
And you're familiar with the fact that you testified about this case in December of last year, true?
Well, we had a hearing on, could I testify, a Daubert hearing.
Okay. You had already created your report in this case, true?
Yes.
Okay. And at that point in time, you did not have the medical records to read in this case, true or false?
I did have medical records. We can go back to the original opinion, but I had the medical records of, hold on, WAUKESHA County Medical, inventory medical, there was the medical records. Oh no, apparently they were supplied later. Yes. So they were supplied later. No, I did not, when I wrote that originally.
Okay, and when you completed these calculations, it was your belief that there was no evidence of hepatic injury in Lynn Hernan. True or false?
I tried to use what I call conservative numbers, the lowest numbers I could that took into account the number of issues. I did not have a medical record at the time. No, I did have the autopsy, and the autopsy says that it is there. I did not have the hospital record, but if you look at the autopsy, it defines that. So I knew of it, but I did not have the actual lab values from the hospital that the medical examiner drew that conclusion.
This was my question in December of 2022 to you. If these types of circumstances impact post-mortem toxicology levels, how is that not important for you to look at it? Your answer, quote, I've explained this, period. There's no evidence of hepatic injury, period.
Okay.
Sir, are you aware that in fact there is evidence of hepatic injury in this case regarding Ms. Hernan?
Yes.
Thank you. Nonetheless, you've done these calculations that the jury has now seen, right? Using, you'd agree with me, several assumptions.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's kind of vague, but yes, there were several assumptions.
I want you to tell this jury and myself what the equation was that you used to go backwards from toxicology levels to pill amounts, please?
The clinical trials of each drug. Before you go to the FDA, you have to do 1, 2, 5 milligrams, whatever it is. You know, you give them 220, then you do another study, you do another study. If you give it twice a day, 3 times a day, if you give it 3 times a day for 2 weeks, does it build up? A number of things. And you can go through that. It is human data specifically on that drug. And you know how much they got because these are clinical trials. There's nurses giving these people these tablets at a specific time on a clinical trial unit. They're not home saying, I'm going to take it every 8 hours or something. They're in a clinical trial unit. And so you can look at these and say, okay, 5 milligrams 3 times a day or 20 milligrams once a day produces these levels. This is something the FDA accepted and I accepted. So that's to get to those levels. Those are referred to as therapeutic levels. And there are therapeutic levels depending on what dose you're taking and how often you're taking it. Because some drugs you take twice a day, 3 times a day, some you take once a day, etc.
Sir, you'd agree with me that clinical trials are done on people that are alive, true?
Yes.
And clinical trials report levels from samples taken from people who are alive, true?
Yes.
And those trials have the benefit of taking many samples over time, true?
Yes.
And there's the benefit of recording the data in terms of the level and time as it correlates through the study.
Yes, peak levels, half-life, a number of things, how long it stays in the blood. They report the whole pharmacokinetic parameters.
You mentioned amitriptyline this morning. Do you remember that, sir?
Yes.
Are you aware of a 2021 publication in the Journal of Forensic Sciences that involved that substance?
You'd have to be more specific. I read a lot of papers.
Sure. The author is PhD Peter Manskell, and the title of it is Just Say No to Postmortem Drug Dose Calculations.
Okay.
Are you familiar with that paper?
No.
This was published.
Object to any further discussion about it. Wasn't submitted as a learned treatise, and he's not familiar with it.
Sustained for now. I'll take it up outside the presence of the jury later.
I want to ask you some questions about your article, Drug Facilitated Sexual Assaults.
Mhm.
And I believe that was entered into evidence this morning. And you testified to this jury that because of that publication, you were successful in getting tetrahydrozoline added to rape check panels.
Well, the FBI recommendation for what you check for, yes. I mean, you don't have to use the FBI recommendation, but that's what we wanted. It eventually got there because publication is a slow process. You write the paper, it gets published, other people read it. But yes, it is now part of the FBI list of things recommended to check for.
To check for when?
When there is drug facilitated sexual assault.
Okay. So here in Wisconsin, we call that a sexual assault nurse exam, a SANE exam.
Okay.
And levels are pulled, samples are taken during those exams. Is that the rape check that you talked about earlier?
Yes.
Okay. Do you know whether any hospital in Wisconsin includes tetrahydrozoline in those checks?
I'm not from Wisconsin. I don't know.
Okay. Even if they did, you'd agree with me that those samples taken during sexual assault nurse exams have to be sent out to labs to test for levels. True?
Yes. You're not going to get it in an ER or a hospital. It's a pretty exotic test.
Okay.
It'll be sent out.
You testified a lot this morning that dizziness is something that someone that's ingested tetrahydrozoline may suffer from. Do you remember that?
Yeah, they do complain of dizziness. Complain about a number of other things.
Would you agree with me that the article that you wrote defines the use of tetrahydrozoline for chemical submission?
I'm sorry,
Of a victim?
I do not understand that question. What am I being asked?
would you agree that individuals using tetrahydrozoline to facilitate a sexual assault use it because it makes the victim unable to resist the attacker?
Yes, I would say yes. They usually mix it with alcohol. They can mix it with other drugs, but they usually mix it with alcohol as well.
And you'd agree with me that it's also selected because it impairs memory, so the victim is less likely to accurately recall the circumstances.
Yes, they have if you talk to the victims, they have these periods where they wake up and they're like, ah, and then they fade out again. And there's often 2 or 3 of these episodes before they finally wake up and get out of there. But they don't wake up and stay awake. It definitely impairs memory. But they have periods where they wake up and they can give you these memories like they're in a bed naked or something. So it's these periods of like where they're alert and then they kind of get drowsy again.
And you'd agree with me that the drug is also selected because it impairs judgment, coupled with reduced inhibition, giving the attacker the impression of collaboration or submission by the victim.
I would say yes. When they mix it with alcohol, yeah, I would say yes.
And just so you're aware, I'm reading from your paper on
Okay,
this
I
verbatim.
agree with me.
Okay, good. You'd also agree that it's selected because it's a substance that's not routinely detected on standard drug analysis screens.
Definitely. That was one of our efforts, was to have it added to the FBI list. Whether they use that list, that's up to them.
Mhm.
But we wanted to get it on the list.
And the selection of that substance might also have to do with its availability to the perpetrator.
Yes.
I next want to move to your exhibit number 623. If we could please publish that for the jury. If we could blow it up, please, Mr. Vulcanier. Sir, you'd agree with me that there's missing information for the clinical effects at peak for the first 3 entries in this chart.
Well, that's when they got the blood level of 51.4, but they have a clinical history of what she's doing. The parents brought her in. So they have an understanding of what's going on, which is why they went and got the tetrahydrozoline level, So yes, there is a history of how the child was doing in the previous hours. They don't have blood from the previous hours, but they know what was going on with the child.
Can you please circle the number 115 on your exhibit that you prepared?
Just on here?
Sure, it'll make a little mark actually. Sir, that number is a calculation that you did, yes or no?
Yes.
Okay, that can be cleared, Madam Clerk. The second line of this exhibit that reports a level of 39.3, do you see where I'm at?
Yes.
You'd agree with me that although it's not listed, that toddler ended up in the ICU.
Yes. Not an uncommon thing for a toddler.
And going to the line below that, can you please circle the box where there's no information regarding intervention so the jury can see where we're at? You'd agree with me that in that Lowry study, this toddler had a Glasgow coma score of 10 and was unarousable.
If you're reading it, I'm going to say yes.
You'd agree with me that where your circle is, it might have been important to put down that that child was on a ventilator for 10 hours.
Yeah.
Okay. The next 2 lines are statistical trickery. True?
I have to say the use of the mean and the median, and to say that these are postmortem levels. We went through this, but the median shows you that 56 of these 112 are meaningless. They're there. You can find them. They have exceptional clinicians at NMS. They found it, but was it clinically significant at less than 1.7?
I'll ask it again. You told this jury this morning that those 2 rows are, quote, statistical trickery. True or false?
I still agree with that.
So true.
True.
Now, when you look at exhibit 623, you'd agree with me that you didn't include every single piece of information that you could on this chart, right? Of every published article about this substance that's ever existed. This is a summary, right?
This is ones that had blood levels. Only ones that had blood levels.
You suggested this morning when you talked about this chart that these kiddos were fine and that you were next to them in the ICU in their bed watching them and all they needed was observation. Do you remember that?
Sustained is to the form of the question.
You testified this morning that those children involved in this Lowry study were absolutely fine. True?
Well, they might have been drowsy, but they needed no medical intervention. They were not intubated. They did not have pressors going on. We didn't have to put a liter of fluid into them to bring their blood pressure back up. We didn't give them atropine to raise their heart rate up. Nothing.
You'd agree with me that there can be very severe symptoms from oral ingestion of tetrahydrozoline.
I would call all of these severe. You know, when they use it for sexual assault in these kids, they're spending a day in the hospital. All of this is like severe.
Sir, did you write an article called Prolonged Cardiovascular Effects After Unintentional Ingestion of Tetrahydrozoline?
Yes,
Was that in the year 2008?
probably. It'll say on the paper.
Attorney Kukler didn't show the jury that article, did she, this morning?
I don't know.
In that article, would you agree with me that your opinion was that clinical effects from ingestion of tetrahydrozoline have included drowsiness, coma, respiratory depression, bradycardia, hypotension, hypotonia, muscle flaccidity, and hypothermia?
Yes. But they all wake up. I could go through why, but we won't.
You'd agree with me that there is much more literature about tetrahydrozoline published involving people who survived its use.
Yes.
And you'd agree with me that some of the symptoms in that literature include CNS depression,
Yes.
shallow respirations,
Yes.
requiring intubation,
In some cases, yes.
apnea.
Yes, but if you touch them, they breathe.
I'm sorry.
If you touch them, they breathe. If you just, yeah, I'll go through this if you want to know the mechanism. But
Touch them and the apnea is gone.
I believe I'm not allowed to answer questions I'm not asked.
The defense calls you as a witness. They'll have an opportunity to ask follow-up questions should they deem it appropriate. It is important just to answer the questions that are being asked.
Yes, Your Honor.
And you're aware that tetrahydrozoline ingestion can cause complete atrioventricular block.
Yes, AV block.
That's a serious thing. Wouldn't you agree with me?
The thing is the ventricles keep pumping. Atrial, there's a heart, there's two atrium and two ventricles. The ventricles have their own rate. And so even if you have AV block, the ventricles still pump.
In terms of on a
We've got
spectrum,
reports of complete AV block and they wake up.
Mhm. In terms of putting these things on a spectrum, would you put atrioventricular block as more or less serious than dizziness?
More.
Okay. You testified this morning about what France offers consumers for eye drops. Do you remember that?
Yes,
And you testified that anyone can get nefazoline in France,
I
right?
believe so, yeah.
Yeah. That doesn't have tetrahydrozoline in it, does it?
No,
You cannot go into a store in France and buy eye drops with tetrahydrozoline in them.
no, it's not approved in France. It's the same mechanism. They're all imidazoline derivatives. We have 3 available in the US. They have 1.
You testified this morning that you can take as much ibuprofen as you want and you're not going to die.
Close. You have to get more than 450 milligrams per kilo. So if you want to do the math, say you're 100 kilos, that's 210 pounds. 450 times 100, you have to get like, it's just the Costco bottle. So yes, there is ultimately an amount, but it's the least dangerous of the over-the-counter analgesics. Aspirin and acetaminophen are quite dangerous. Ibuprofen isn't.
You'd agree with me that this morning, after you told the jury that you can't die from ibuprofen, Attorney Kukler showed you an article that you wrote that reports fatal overdoses with ibuprofen alone in the number of 15.
I object to her saying what I did. 'cause
She
it's-
can overrule.
It's just
It's
not
cross. She can ask the
accurate.
question.
450 milligrams per kilo. We know the dose. That's a lot. People are, when they want to do it, they do it.
I'd like to bring up Exhibit 544, please. Mr. Spiller, you do not have a MD, true?
True.
You do not have a PhD, true?
True.
You have a master in what?
Toxicology.
Okay. Because on this exhibit, it says that you have a master of science.
Yes, it is a Master of Science.
But this morning and just now when I asked you, you said that your master's degree was in toxicology.
Well, if you can either get a Master of Arts or a Master of Science. That's what the degree says. Then your specialty is whatever. And I put my thesis, which was carbon monoxide in the home, source and epidemiology.
The school where you received that degree, Columbia Pacific University, no longer exists
No, I don't think so.
because the state of California shut it down by court order.
Don't know. It was long after I was involved with it.
And degrees that were issued after 1997 aren't even recognized anymore.
Again, that was a decade after I was involved with it.
On this page of your CV, you also list an American Board of Forensic Examiners, right?
Oh, there, yes,
That's also been shut down, hasn't it?
probably.
And
That's the one we were talking about that I no longer belong to.
Mhm.
It's something I did back in the 90s.
That's all I have. Thank you, sir.
Yes.
Redirect.
Get mic'd up.
Mr. Spiller, your CV is 44 pages long, right?
Yes.
There's dozens and dozens of articles, more than 100, maybe 200 articles that I didn't show the jury today, right?
It's about 220.
Okay, we didn't. And it's fair to say during the break, despite Attorney Nikolai's suggestion that I showed you some article about, what was this article about? Because I've never even seen that article. Acetaminophen or something like that?
Tizanidine? No, I don't know.
I didn't show you any article about that during the break, did I? About acetaminophen.
Oh,
I'm saying that I didn't show you this article that she's talking about during the break.
okay. Yeah, I
True.
think we're talking about this was in acetaminophen, aspirin, and ibuprofen.
Right.
Is that what we're talking about?
That's right. I'm just saying, I didn't show you that. We didn't talk about that during the break.
Objection. This was entered by defense as Exhibit 626.
That's not the question. The insinuation was that
Hold on, stop. I'm excusing the jury.
She's lost it. Darrell's lost them. I mean, the judge has let this happen. The judge has let it happen. What's happened now?
Be seated.
This is
Good morning, both sides. Stop with the speaking objections. It needs to stop now. And we need to be very precise on when we refer to things that I know have happened in the course of this case. And I'm referring to that sidebar. And I'm going to make a record of that right now. And then we'll bring the jury back out after I address this last objection. As it relates to that sidebar, the defense initially objected to receipt of 232. I sustained it, frankly, just because of a foundation. I thought some more questions could be asked, maybe even show the witness the exhibit. But I also know, because we had a hearing in December of last year, specifically on December 9th, where 232 was marked as Exhibit 8. And this witness at that hearing was questioned about that document. And it is fair game for the state to ask him his knowledge about it and what its source is. And number one, he's an expert. He's provided opinions today in front of this jury in forensic toxicology. These are guidelines for opinions and testimony in forensic toxicology. His knowledge of them or lack thereof goes directly to his credibility, which this jury will need to determine. I've already referenced he was questioned about it at a prior hearing, again, Exhibit 8. Of course, the defense can redirect, that's appropriate, but then Attorney Kukler accused me of yelling at her in front of the jury, which I was not doing. Out of an abundance of caution, I turned my face away from the jury box and directed it at the back of the courtroom. Was I frustrated? Absolutely. I was frustrated because I knew what this witness had been shown and testified about at that prior hearing. And more importantly, the defense knows about it because it's a transcript that is in this file that was requested by the defense. And so I was frustrated because the defense knows better. And I'm just making this record abundantly clear. I was not yelling. I was in a hushed tone. And I think she said, well, it looks like you're yelling at me. That's why I turned away. And was I frustrated? Absolutely. And I'm also frustrated because of the speaking objections and trying to get information in front of this jury through either making comments or testifying, which, as you both know, that's not how it is properly done. I also know I sustained an objection. I know you moved on, Attorney Nicolai, and I said I take it up if you so wish. Is that a topic you wish to go back into?
I can do that with Dr. Kasenko.
All right, very well. Anything the state wants to add to the sidebar?
No,
Anything the defense wants to add to the sidebar?
just that I wondered if the court wanted me to talk to the witness since he didn't seem to remember it. And I couldn't help that the witness at that moment didn't remember seeing the guidelines. And I recommended that the state hand him the actual exhibit, and maybe that would refresh his recollection. It seems like it did.
I appreciate you adding that. And I will also add at that sidebar, I said, well, it was offered. There didn't seem to be a yes or no, but in any event, I said, that's a good idea. Let's give him the exhibit and we'll go on from there. With that, we'll bring the jury back out. If there are any more objections, just say objection. If you want to say relevance, again, 1 or 2 words. I don't want speaking objections. And I am going to say this outside the presence of the jury, Mr. Spiller. This came up during our motion hearing. I know you have a lot of information and I know you want to get it out, but let the attorneys direct by asking you the question. Sometimes they call for yes or no answers, and please just do that and not provide extra information. There hasn't been really a whole lot of objections, and sometimes that can be for strategy reasons, but it's important though that you do that and not talk over the other the attorneys who are asking the questions. Okay, you understand that?
Yes.
Good. And you're hearing okay?
As long as the microphone works.
They should be working.
Question when we broke? I'm sorry, could I ask him that?
Well, there was a speaking objection and I dismissed the jury just to let you know.
But I don't know if you ruled on the objection.
What was the, well, I haven't called for them yet. I did not. Madam Clerk, Madam Reporter, what was the last question that was asked? If you can tell. Do you recall where you were at, Attorney
I
Kukler?
think that I was asking whether or not during this lunch break I showed
Oh, right.
Mr. Spiller any articles, because I didn't. And I thought it was about ibuprofen or something. I was just trying to get the name of the articles at the district.
What's the
attorney.
number? I believe the state referenced an exhibit.
626.
626.
My objection was to the inference that this study was never introduced by the defense today, and it was. It's an exhibit.
See, now I didn't ask that, Judge.
Well,
I
hold
just
on.
asked him if we talked about it during the break. Because did you notice that the state said, I want to talk to you about an exhibit that Attorney Kukler showed to you during the break. That's how the question was asked. And I didn't show him any exhibit during the lunch break. So that's the point.
Well, be that as it may, 626 is an exhibit.
I know that.
So it should be accurately portrayed as such by both sides if they reference it as an exhibit previously received in this case. I think you've made your point. You asked the witness if he saw it during a break, if you showed it to him. Madam Reporter, was there an answer given?
That's when the objection came in.
Right, so I'll overrule the objection
He can answer
and he can answer the question.
the question when the jury comes in.
Yes, as long as you specifically refer to that exhibit accurately.
All right.
Okay, now we can have the jury brought out.
I've lost all respect for her. Like, right, just address it. Fair, fuck that. I don't want to see a picture of her. I get the whole thing, right? If they discussed it previously, we didn't know that, right? But even if they did discuss it previously, it's months and months ago. How is the witness supposed to remember that document? That's not fair on the witness to be told, oh, you know, you looked at this last year. Fine, maybe tell him that then. Don't, you know, presume that he's not looking at documents like they should be looking at documents. So I didn't like that, even though she did clarify it, fine, but still naughty. And she was 100% shouting. I was very professional of her. And even though I still fancy her, I still think she's very unprofessional for how she's acted. It doesn't matter. Like, all of this is childish now. Both sides have been childish. The court has just, yeah, Katie says how we got the doc in. Yes, I understand that how they got it in, but they could have been clearer. They could all have been a lot clearer. Just give him the document and say, "Do you remember testifying about this back in whenever it was?" And he'd be like, "Yes or no." Not just sneaking in and other ways, but I'm more mad at the judge now. I'm just like, I was saying, none of this makes any difference, I don't think, to the conclusion of it. I just think they look really, really bad. Really, really bad at the minute. And I'd like this judge. I've liked it all the way through. But I think she's lost control today. I think she's gone from one of the top judges I've seen down to still like 60%, but I don't know. She's not as good as I thought she was. Come on, let's get it over done with now. Then I don't think there's anything to get out now.
Thank you, everyone. Please be seated. Attorney Kugler, if you would please re-ask the last question that you had asked, but we did not get an answer prior to the court excusing the jury.
Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Spiller, you recall Exhibit 626 that was introduced during this case?
Yes.
And you were asked by the state whether we had met during the lunch hour to review this article. We never met during the lunch hour to review the article, did we?
Correct. No.
You were asked questions about whether or not this data that has been introduced through NM.
I don't think so. No, yeah, I disagree. I don't think I don't really understand how the defense have played the. I say we all interpret it differently, so it's fine. It's
MS Labs. If you somehow have access to this data or other people do,
I don't know where he
for
is.
the purpose of forming opinions about therapeutic levels, there's some kind of questions about that.
No, it's a proprietary database. You have
What
to
does
be,
that mean?
they own it. So you have to be a member of that laboratory or go through some process and request it. I have not attempted to request it, but proprietary means they own it. It's private. And you can't just go up there and say, let me look at it.
What about when you've worked decades as director of poison control centers? Can people access that data?
Yes.
Why is that?
The CDC and the FDA use this data. They help support MPDS. All other centers use this data. Is a database voluntarily
And you'd agree with me that some of the symptoms
get these additive, they get, and she lives, walks out of the hospital after 3 days. But she was found cold. 2 healthcare professionals could not find a pulse. You do look.
Next question.
You were asked a question earlier today, and you started to talk about these meetings that you have, or you've been part of, these monthly meetings. These are monthly meetings with medical examiners and other people?
No, it's the coroner's monthly meeting for Columbus. It is a medical examiner. Columbus, Ohio, the coroner they made a law, it had to be a pathologist, an MD pathologist. So their coroner is a medical examiner in Columbus. And they would ask us to come, not just us, there were a number of people because they'd ask for the police, jail, mental health people. We would go through the case to see if there was, we could figure out something we were missing because we have these people dying. And so everyone would put in, and once they brought up, we had the case. This person was, he had asthma. He was in the hospital 3 days earlier for asthma, got discharged, comes home. The 911 call is played. He's saying, I'm short of breath, asthma symptom. He's talking normally. He's not wildly agitated, seizing, anything like that. They pick him up. He goes to the hospital and he ultimately dies of his asthma attack in the ER. But they found cocaine on this guy. So they were like, it's cocaine. And we're like, no, I mean, I don't want this guy going, his last thing being, I died of cocaine overdose when it was really his asthma. So we discussed it and they changed it.
You were asked about Exhibit 623 at length about the different calculations that you made, or at least the calculation you made for one of the children in that study where you calculated at peak, the child would have been 115 ng per ml.
Yes.
And you were asked also about Dr. Kasinko's study again, what you called statistical trickery.
Okay, I did.
Yeah, okay.
I don't mean to be rude, but
All right.
I don't like when you present statistics that look one way and they really are the other. I mean, the median is really the only level there that should be put forward.
I mean, why shouldn't you look at the mean?
Because an outlier pulled that mean way off. They use of like levels of 1, 2, 1, 100. And that a mean would be 27 or 26. The median is going to be 1. And so you look at the difference, and that's why you want someone who's reviewing this knows how, is not just an expert in tetrahydrozoline, but is also an expert in databases and statistics.
Have you testified in many cases over your career?
I'm 69. It's probably been 30, 35, sometimes it's 1 or 2 a year. Then it's a couple of years I don't.
So just in general, when you talk about polydrug overdoses, how serious do polydrug overdoses get?
Depends on what's in the polydrug, but they get increasingly serious because of the synergy. If we have 2 drugs that are both working on, say, heart rate or blood pressure, and we have 2 more that are working on CNS depression and respiratory depression, and we start to get these additive, they get really serious. So it is, generally speaking, like we've done a lot of studies, and the polydrugs are always the worst. They have greater numbers of major effects, greater numbers of fatalities than single.
And so that's that stool you're talking about. If we've got the 5-legged stool, all of these drugs knocking out the legs of the stool.
Yes, slowly. Yeah. One, because your blood pressure, for example, you've got smooth muscle around the arteries. That'll constrict them. You also have heart rate called cardiac output. If you want to increase the blood pressure, your heart rate can go faster. That's fight or flight response. You also have baroreceptors in the neck and your carotid arteries. You have something called ACE inhibitors that are converted angiotensin 1 to angiotensin 2 in the kidney. I mean, there's multiple mechanisms that are used to support your blood pressure. And so if you knock out, like for instance, ACE inhibitors, angiotensin 1 to angiotensin 2, children that get those, we don't care because they have these other mechanisms. But if you start to start to knock out this leg of the stool, knock out that leg of the stool, it gets more dangerous quickly.
Things like baclofen.
Yes.
Objection.
Sustained as to the form of the question, please.
For what kind of, what types of drugs, for example, might knock out those legs of the stool that we care about?
Nifedipine.
Hold on. There's been a sustained asked and answered. Move on.
I'm sorry.
I sustained the objection.
And so in your career, coroners, I think I understood you to say, ask you to come and help them figure out what's going on in a case.
I'd say it's more occasional than regular.
Oh, I
They
just-
do, but it's not every day. No.
Not every day, but on occasion you're asked.
Usually when it's something out of the ordinary, and they're like, what is this? So they call us up and we talk to them. Like we had a brodifacoum, which is rat poison. And he didn't know what brodifacoum was. And I told him, it stops your clotting. He couldn't clot. He bled out in the brain and he died. And he's like, what is this? So sometimes when it's out of their expertise, they'll call us.
Did Dr. B call you in this case to seek an opinion?
No.
Did Dr. Kasinko call you in this case to seek an opinion?
No.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have.
All right, thank you. All right, Mr. Spiller, thank you for being here. You may step down. And thank you. Date?
I know, I'm just looking. Sorry, I'm just looking. Don, can you tell me where it says where it originates or where you're getting the 2015 date? Oh, I see it now. Thank
See
you.
it?
Yes, Judge, we agree to that.
Thank you. And what will the exhibit number be?
6:30.
Okay. I have very scribbly notes, Madam Clerk, for the ultimate jury instruction. Hopefully we can read them later. All right. Then it is true, other than my colloquy with Ms. Kurczewski, that when we bring the jury back out, the defense intends to rest.
After I introduce.
After that, yes. After that.
Yes, Judge.
All right, so while the jury is still out, then, Ms. Kurczewski, I'd like to have a brief discussion with you regarding your right to testify. And you can hear me okay?
Yes.
All right, and let's just make sure the microphone is close enough to her. First of all, ma'am, do you understand that you have a constitutional right to testify?
Yes.
Do you understand that you also have a constitutional right not to testify?
Yes.
Do you understand that the decision whether to testify is for you to make?
Yes.
Has anyone made any threats against you to influence your decision on whether to testify in this trial?
It wasn't about the objection. It was about how the judge lost the control and was just shouting or seemed to be shouting at both sides, at the prosecution and the defense. And it was just very unprofessional of her. And that was the complaint made by the defense attorney, that she was very unprofessional in that moment. She shouldn't have lost the temper like she did. Everyone saw it, the jury saw it, everyone saw it. So the judge was out of order there. She shouldn't have lost the temper like that. And I'm a big fan of the judge, or I was anyway.
Trial.
No.
Has anyone made any promises to you to influence your decision on whether to testify in this trial?
No.
Have you discussed with your lawyers the advantages and disadvantages of testifying and not testifying in this case?
Yes, multiple times.
Do you need any additional time to speak with them?
No.
Have you made a decision?
Yes.
What is that decision?
It was very hard for me to decide, but ultimately I will not be testifying.
Right, and Attorney Kukler, have you, and Attorney Galaviz, I'm so sorry, have you had a sufficient opportunity to thoroughly discuss this case with Ms. Kurczewski and specifically the decision whether to testify in this case?
Yes, Judge.
And are you satisfied that she is making this decision today freely, voluntarily, and intelligently?
Yes, Judge.
All right, thank you. Then the court finds that Ms. Kurczewski is making the decision to not testify in this case freely, voluntarily, and intelligently with a full understanding of the advantages and disadvantages of doing so under the circumstances of this case. The jury will be so instructed then with the appropriate jury instruction. All right, then lastly, I know that the state intends to offer a rebuttal witness. Is that right?
Yes.
And is that Dr. Kasinko?
Yes.
Is that the only rebuttal witness?
Yes.
And I know the state had filed, sorry, the defense had filed a motion at one point. Is there still an objection to that?
Yes.
On what basis?
Dr. Krasinko has already testified. I don't believe that anything that she's going to say today will be true bona fide rebuttal evidence that she's expect that her testimony will be mostly a repeat of what she's already testified to. Of course, this court has broad discretion in setting a scope of rebuttal testimony. So if this court's going to allow
She is there.
hopeful that the court will decide on specific points
There she is there, the rebuttal witness.
that are agreed upon or that the court feels are new areas to discuss. But I think that everything we talked about with Mr. Spiller was in response to what was already testified to by Dr. Krasinko.
Attorney Nicolai, will you be addressing this?
Yes. We are asking for the opportunity to call Dr. Krasinko for a few very specific points, rebutting new information that this jury just heard today from the defense witness, Henry Spiller. The bulk of my questions will revolve around the calculations that he was allowed to do, the guidelines that he chooses not to follow when offering those opinions. And I certainly don't intend to rehash testimony that she's already given. I understand the purpose of rebuttal, and that's exactly what we'll be doing with her testimony.
All right, given the offer of proof from the state, understanding my authority in 906.11, coupled with the fact that the state bears the burden of proof and that the proffered testimony falls within the scope of rebuttal, specifically as it relates to the calculations and the guidelines, which were made an exhibit 232, I will allow the state to call Dr. Krasinko for those purposes.
Judge, did you want a full offer of proof and have me list all the topics that I plan to address? Respectfully, I don't think I'm required to do that. I understand the law, and it will be things that were raised by Mr. Spiller today, including her so-called statistical trickery, as well as a discussion of black box warnings that were inaccurate.
I would say those are fair game as well. So, and I trust that if the parties will utilize their objections as they deem appropriate, again, I'll remind the parties I would prefer
Pathologist in the laboratory doing.
have you do is to state your first and last names for the record and spell each.
Didn't like this
Sherry
witness before.
Kacinko, SherryKacinko.
Thank you. Go ahead, Attorney Nicolai.
Thank you, Judge. Dr. Krasinko, you're here at this point for a very specific reason, and you're aware of that, right?
Yes,
Were you able to view the testimony from Mr. Spiller in this case?
yes.
I have some pretty specific questions on topics that I'd like to clarify with you about that testimony, okay?
Okay.
He's talking about
There
defendant.
was discussion about black
Well,
box
the-
warnings with
Yes.
Mr. Spiller. Do you recall that?
Yes.
Do you believe that that was accurately defined for this jury?
The black box warnings vary by drug, so I think it's important to understand what they are generally, but also with respect to the specific drugs.
For example, do you recall a discussion of the alprazolam black box warning?
Yes.
What is your opinion on the purpose of that warning?
The black box warning on alprazolam is a warning to consider whether or not it is necessary to prescribe opioids and benzodiazepines together. It is not a warning to never do it. It's just saying if you are going to do so, use caution. And then it continues to say that there are situations where it is appropriate to prescribe both hydrocodone and alprazolam, or I'm sorry, an opioid and alprazolam together.
I have a similar question for you regarding the discussion about the baclofen black box warning. Do you recall that?
Yes.
Are you familiar with the warning associated with baclofen?
Yes, I am.
And why is that warning on baclofen medication?
The black box warning for baclofen is specifically referring to the abrupt discontinuation of intrathecal, which is when it's infused into the intrathecal space, or chronic oral dosing. So it is a warning that you should not abruptly discontinue the drug in those two situations, but rather the drug should be tapered off over time if there is a desire to stop using it chronically or intrathecally.
Now, doctor, remind the jury, please, what your PhD is in.
It is in toxicology.
Would you consider yourself a clinical chemist?
I am not a clinical chemist.
If the jury was told that people at NMS labs do great work and produce levels, but shouldn't be interpreting them, would you agree with that as it relates to you?
Not as it relates to my job, no.
Why would you disagree with that?
I do not do laboratory work at all. So I am not doing any work in the laboratory to determine the concentration. We have a staff of, I believe now over 300, I'm going to toot their horn, amazing analytical toxicologists in the laboratory doing the work. My job is to review the data, make sure that the results are accurately reported, and to offer interpretation into the pharmacology and toxicology of the findings as related to the individual cases.
So would it be fair to say that part of your actual job duty with NMS is to interpret those levels?
Yes.
And does that include interpreting them when asked to by medical examiners?
Sustained.
Do you ever interpret the toxicology data for medical examiners?
Yes, I do. In consultation with medical examiners, yes.
I want to ask you some questions about Exhibit 232. If we could please publish that, it's been entered into evidence.
Go ahead.
One moment. Dr. Kacinko, are you familiar with Exhibit 232?
Yes, I am.
Are the guidelines in this document limited to people belonging to a certain board or association?
No.
Could you please explain to the jury what these guidelines are for?
These guidelines are for people who are practicing forensic toxicology. And by practicing forensic toxicology, I primarily mean offering testimony as to analytical toxicology, so that testing that's done in the laboratory, or interpreting the results of analytical testing in court.
Did Mr. Spiller interpret results of analytical testing in this trial?
Yes, he did.
Is that a forensic toxicology opinion?
Sorry, I got you. I got you, girl. I still love you. Whatever. It's all good.
Yes, it is.
Does this set of guidelines offer?
I just think I'm a little bit frustrated. Not so much with the defense. I'm just frustrated with them all, if I'm being honest. Every single one of them.
Best practices for opinions like that?
Yes, it does.
Is there a best practice very specific about reverse calculations from postmortem samples?
Are you, with respect to calculating a dose from postmortem
Right.
concentrations? Yes, there is.
And what is that best practice?
It is considered inappropriate to calculate a dose based on a postmortem concentration.
Is that what Mr. Spiller did in this case?
It appears so, yes.
Were you able to hear his answer when I asked him what formula or equation he used to do that?
Yes, I did.
And did that clarify for you how he came to the numbers that the jury has seen?
It did not.
Are there formulas for those types of calculations?
There are formulas to be used in clinical toxicology when you're dealing with living patients and primarily plasma concentrations.
Do you actually teach those formulas to medical students?
Not to medical students, no.
But you do teach that to a group of students in what area?
I teach a pharmacology course, a clinical pharmacology course to students in a Master's of Forensic Science program. And as part of that program, I do cover the use of those calculations and performing those calculations in a clinical setting.
What is your instruction to those students regarding performing those calculations with postmortem samples?
That they should never use those calculations when dealing with a postmortem sample.
Why?
If you look at the actual calculations, the formulas that are used, there's a lot of variables in those formulas. And a lot of times we just don't have that information, even in clinical samples, clinical cases, you may not have all of the information. And then when you add on all of the things that were discussed previously that can happen to make an individual person different from a population. So differences in their metabolism, a disease state that affects their ability to clear the drug. Some people have delayed gastric emptying, so it takes longer for things to empty out of their stomach. There can be genetic issues that change how someone, I don't want to say issues, that's just different people have different genetics with respect to metabolism of drugs. And then there are all the changes that can happen post-mortem. The post-mortem, we're using blood, and these studies that are used to determine all of these variables are always done in plasma. Whole blood and plasma are not the same. Drug concentrations often differ between whole blood and plasma. And then the topic of postmortem redistribution is also an issue. So because there are a lot of variables that even in clinical cases, we often don't have the information. And then all of these other things that can happen when you're dealing with a postmortem sample, and using blood instead of plasma, the calculations just do not apply anymore when you have a postmortem blood sample. The calculations that are used for clinical toxicology do not apply to postmortem toxicology.
Do you recall, well, are you a member of the American Academy of Forensic Sciences Standards Board?
So the American Academy of Forensic Sciences, I am a member of that organization. The Academy Standards Board is not a membership organization. It is a board of individuals who have applied to sit on different committees under this board. I act as a liaison for what's called the consensus body under the Academy Standard Board, but I am not on the Academy Standards Board.
Do you have to even be involved with the American Academy of Forensic Sciences to utilize these guidelines?
To the best of my knowledge, you don't even have to be a member of the American Academy of Forensic Sciences to sit on a committee under the Academy Standards Board. It's just an organization that exists underneath the American Academy of Forensic Sciences, but you could be a member of the Society of Forensic Toxicologists and also sit on the Academy Standard Board committees.
Did you hear Mr. Spiller say that it would be inappropriate for him to be on these boards because of the work he does?
I do not recall that specific testimony.
Object to that question, move to strike. It's Ms. State's testimony.
The objection is overruled and the witness's answer may stand. Next question.
Would someone who is doing the vast majority of their work in clinical toxicology be disallowed from following these guidelines in any way?
No.
Are you aware of any peer-reviewed literature that actually shows just how unreliable dosing calculations from postmortem samples are?
Yes, I am.
And is that an article from 2021?
Yes.
I'd like to show the witness Exhibit 234.
I did provide Madam Clerk with a paper copy for the court and defense.
Thank you.
Dr. Kusenko, do you recognize Exhibit 234?
Yes, I do.
Is that the publication that we've just talked about?
Yes.
Have you read through this publication?
Yes, I have.
Is it peer reviewed?
Yes, it is.
Could you describe the goal of this study?
I don't have it on my screen.
You have a paper copy, I believe.
Oh, that's true. It passed it back.
Thank you.
What was being tested in this study?
This study was designed to evaluate the use of those formulas that I talked about. And there are a number of different formulas depending on the dosing strategy that is used and different variables that are available. So they looked at multiple different calculations and determine if the calculations could accurately calculate a dose based on a postmortem concentration.
How did they know whether the calculation was accurate or not?
So in this case, they had investigative information primarily about what dose of the specific drug in this that they were using was amitriptyline. So they have information on what dose the individual took, and they have a postmortem concentration. So they were able to use the formula to calculate a dose and then compare it to the dose that was known to have been taken.
And is Exhibit 234 a discussion of the findings of that study?
Yes.
I'd move Exhibit 234 into evidence, ask for permission to publish.
No objection.
Exhibit 234 is received, permission to publish is granted.
Sorry, we don't have it digitally. Doctor, what's the name of the article?
Just say no to postmortem drug dose
And
calculations.
what is the conclusion?
I'm just checking to see if they have a specific conclusion or if I need to summarize it. I don't want to, actually. May I read directly from the?
Sure.
As expected, both the uncertainty and the accuracy of the dose calculation for a consumed drug from its postmortem blood concentration are too large to allow reliable estimations. This work again reinforces that dose calculations from postmortem blood concentrations should not be carried out.
What page of that were you reading from?
It's in the journal, it's page 1869.
Thank you. So it'll be under the conclusion heading?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Doctor, is that conclusion consistent with the guidelines that we talked about?
Yes.
Is it consistent with the way that you teach your students?
Yes.
The last thing that I want to ask you about, Doctor, is the abstract that you created in this case. I'm sorry, you didn't create in this case. It's an exhibit in this case from your presentation in France. Do you recall that?
Yes.
This document, which is Exhibit 216, has already been entered into evidence. I'll publish it, please, for the jury.
Go ahead.
Doctor, this abstract was described to this jury as statistical trickery multiple times today. Did you hear that?
I did.
You take issue with that?
I do, primarily because I don't know what statistical trickery is.
Okay. What was the goal of putting this abstract together?
The goal of this abstract was simply to report the data from a large laboratory that does a lot of testing and has a large database of results. So I reported the normal statistical ideas that are reported in papers. Means, medians, and ranges are what are typically reported when you're talking about large data sets.
The opinion of Mr. Spiller was that you should have only used the median. Did you hear that?
I did.
Is that consistent with the way that data is generally shown in writings like this?
No.
Why?
Typically, we report, when I'm publishing any set of data, I report all the different things I just discussed, the mean, the median, and the range, because each of those numbers tells the reader a different type of information. So I'm making sure I'm presenting all of the data, not just selecting one specific statistic to report.
In this case, in this abstract, is anything in it suggesting to the reader that the mean in this case is a known fatal level of tetrahydrozoline?
No.
Is anything in this abstract telling the reader to come to any kind of conclusion by only looking at the mean?
No.
Was this abstract created by you to try to set the fatal level for tetrahydrozoline in the human body?
No.
Is that something that you're working on?
I don't know that there's a study I could do to set the fatal level of tetrahydrozoline in a human body, because I would never get approval to do the study that would give us that information. I am doing the study because it is a drug that we see in not a lot of our cases, but we see it, and often the concentrations are higher than that one clinical study. So it's just a way of expanding the science on tetrahydrozoline, seeing what data I can put out there that might help people in the future with these interpretations.
That's all I have, Doctor. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Cross.
So with regard to the guidelines that you that you referenced today, this is not required. This is not, it doesn't, whether you follow this or not is a personal decision.
They are guidelines, so to some degree, yes. However, I do know that many people working in this organization, it is the expectation of their employer that they follow, that if their employer has adopted the standards and guidelines, that people working in that organization also adopt them.
And so at NMS Labs, your organization apparently adopted this, true?
I don't know that there was a formal announcement, but the general understanding is that to the best of our ability, we do follow all of the published standards and guidelines.
Well, I don't know. I thought I just heard you say that organizations may require that people follow these standards.
They may, and like I said, I'm not sure that we have ever had an official announcement at NMS. We discuss them all of the time in our department meetings. We have people who sit on the different groups and boards. So yes, the expectation at NMS Labs is that employees will follow the guidelines and standards.
And you gave opinions when you were here previously about quantities of THC in Ms. Hernan, didn't you?
I did a calculation on the
That's a yes or a
gastric.
no. Did you give an opinion about it?
I don't believe I can answer that yes or no without In what matrix?
Didn't you prepare a letter where you gave an opinion and offered it to this jury about how much THC you thought was in Ms. Hernan?
No, I did not.
All right. And so you don't know then as you sit here. Is that true?
I do not know the total dose of tetrahydrozoline. No.
As to the black box that you were asked about before, wouldn't you agree that the black box warnings is FDA guidance to providers?
Yes.
And for instance, in the case of baclofen, which you discussed, the prescription is not supposed to, you have to be concerned if you take that with CNS depressants, right?
I would need to review the black box warning again, the entire text. I don't remember everything that's in it.
All right. And then you presented an article today by Peter Maskell, right?
Yes.
Is that something you provided to the state attorneys?
Yes,
And do you know Peter Maskell?
I do.
How do you know him?
He is a toxicologist who regularly attends different conferences. I've met him in passing.
And I did a quick look. Are you familiar with Google Scholar?
Yes,
All
of
right.
course.
And I did a quick look to see how many times this particular paper just say no to postmortem drug calculations has been cited, and it appears to be twice. Did you know that?
No.
Okay. So when a piece of literature is recognized and accepted in the community of toxicology, just like medicine, other people cite to articles, right?
If they're doing related research, yes.
And are you familiar with what what's an H index when it comes to somebody who publishes literature? Do you know?
With respect to an individual?
Yeah.
No, I don't know.
Okay. So you don't know how well recognized Peter Maskell is in the H index or Google Scholar? You haven't looked into that at all?
I have no idea what the H index in Google Scholar is.
Then I have nothing else for this witness.
All right, any redirect?
No, thank you.
All right, thank you. You may step down.
Am I excused?
You are, thank you.
Thank you.
Attorney Nicolai, anything else from the state?
No, thank you.
All right, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I will declare the evidentiary portion of this trial concluded. You are to pass your notebooks to the bailiffs. They will be kept until you deliberate in the jury room. And at this time, after I give you the instruction, I will not only excuse you for the day, but it is my intention to bring you back Monday for closing instructions and closing arguments, and then of course the start of your deliberations. And I'm doing that not because simply it's the weekend and tomorrow is Friday, but there are some things that I need to do with the parties to finalize those closing instructions and to address legal issues that relate to all of those. I need to finalize with Madam Clerk the initial set that I will give to the parties, and that's just simply not done yet. And I don't want you to have to come in and sit in what's still a pretty crowded jury deliberation room while we work on that. It could take an hour, it could take all day. And rather than do that and have you here, and given that we are now ending week 3 and we are ahead of schedule, that I'm going to proceed in this way. But it is very important while you are not here and over the weekend that you heed all of the instructions that I know you have, but that you continue to do that and wait until you deliberate, of course, when you are finally given that opportunity to do so. So with that, I'm going to read, since it is the end of this case must be decided by you, the jurors, based on the
Yeah, I'm just checking to see what time it's on, and I'll go live for that time. We'll watch that live then tomorrow.
Thank you. Be seated. Just want to let you know, I just let Tom, one of the jury bailiffs, know, just to let them know they should be prepared on Monday to work as late as they want to work. So I just wanted them to make those arrangements in case they weren't thinking quite about that. Anything else we need to cover today from the state?
No.
From the defense?
No, thank you. Are we going to address the revised jury instruction?
Not tonight. I am going to work with Madam Clerk when we are off the record for the rest of what is left of today, just to err on the side of caution and to make sure you all have a working draft. I'm going to start court tomorrow at 10 a.m. So, and I'll do my very best to give you a heads up or
10 a.m.
some lead time on that. And for some reason, if it takes us up to that, then you'll get them and we'll just delay the start by a little bit. But
Okay, so 10 o'clock Eastern tomorrow. Oh no, where are they? Wisconsin. Okay, so 10 o'clock Central, 11 o'clock Eastern. But I'd probably go live before that. I'd probably go live at 9:30 Central, 10:30 Eastern, 11, 12, 1, 2, and that's 3:30. Is that 3:30? 10:30, 11, 12, 1, 2, 3:30 UK, 4:30 European. That's what we'll do tomorrow. I'll get just in case it's do start early. I'll get on a little bit earlier. Right, so that's the end of that. I'm sorry about I've not enjoyed today. I've not enjoyed it. So sorry. I stink. Not been a great day for me personally. But that's no excuse anyway. I'd love your comments. Thank you for your comments. Doing this in Twitch TV is a bit behind. So don't worry, Dunya, it's all good. Thank you as always for your contributions. Tomorrow we will cover this, and I might do a little bit of a stream afterwards as well for something else. However, Katie, thank you. I know you're off now. Anybody that wants to watch the other trial, the closing arguments and the verdict, then come and join me. I'm going to film. I'm going to do that now. I'm going to play that right now. So as soon as I close this down, you should be redirected to the other one. If not, then let me put a link in case you're not redirected. Let me just refresh that. Now, obviously, there's no issues if you're not there because obviously it won't be long. I think it'll be about an hour and a half. KTC tomorrow. Have a lovely evening yourself. I say that's 11 o'clock in the night. So Red Rockets. So Jonathan, I know you'll be there. If you're not coming over, I'll see you tomorrow at 3:30 our time. See Katie, Dunya, when you get water, press that link Dunya and come and join us for the closing arguments for the Dallas trial. And with that, free Zachary Anderson, and see you.